American comic, I'm lost, I'm surrounded by superheroes with father issues. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 1, Watching a Meteor Shower, and Finding a Spaceship. Kansas. Late at night. Lin Fang sat in an open area of the farm and looked up at the night sky. The dense trees next to him stood straight and strong, towering into the sky. In the dark night, the red leaves on the trees seemed like flames, burning and falling to his feet. After a while, he lowered his head and picked up the coffee cup placed beside him, and gently tasted the bitter coffee. From the radio next to him, the host's announcement came, "Listeners in Kansas, good evening. I believe everyone has already known that the Geminid meteor shower will come at 12 o'clock in the morning." The host was reporting the news that the largest meteor shower in the past decade had descended on the Earth. Remind my friends, wear a little more than you think is enough, be alert to radiation cooling, and it is best to bring a recliner, go to dark open space without bright light sources, lie on your back and gaze up at the stars. Snap. Lin Fang listened to the chattering of the announcer on the radio, and finally couldn't help reaching out to turn it off. Then he lowered his head and glanced at his watch. It was 11:55, and there were still 5 minutes until the meteor shower at 12 o'clock. He had no interest in this kind of thing that only romantic people have. But since this thing was related to his future happy life, he couldn't help but pay attention to it. As for why it was related to his happy life, it all started with his identity. Originally, Lin Fang was a native of China. Although his quality of life was not far ahead, it was also at a medium level. Unexpectedly, one day he was excited to accompany his girlfriend to watch the meteor shower, but a meteorite fell from the sky and killed him on the spot. After waking up, he found that his soul had traveled through the United States and became a white young man named Peter Patrick. His occupation was an American cowboy with no house or car, and both his parents had passed away. His dead parents left him, in addition to a pile of debts, the farm in front of him that was about to go bankrupt. After listening to the news about a meteor shower tonight, he waited here in advance. See if he can try his luck and go back again with a meteor shower. If he was a capitalist or movie star who traveled through the soul, or a rich second generation, he would still have the idea of struggling. But in this situation, not only does the game start with a sky-falling start, but there is also no cheat code required for time travelers. How can I change my fate? Lin Fang drank all the coffee that refreshed him in one gulp. If he had this ability, he would have been a steel worker in his previous life after all this time. It would be better to go back and lie down with such a hellish start. Just as he was complaining about being a time traveler and embarrassing his predecessors, a bright light suddenly appeared in the distance. In the dark night sky, a long Earth-grazing meteor dragged a long trajectory across the atmosphere. Then more and more meteors descended. Under the curtain of the dark night, a grand meteor shower quietly descended. Countless meteors streaked across the sky, like shining arrows, piercing the night sky with brilliant tail flames. Lin Fang opened his mouth slightly and looked up at the spectacular meteor shower. Boom! A deafening sound rang out in the farm, and a slight ground vibration was heard. Damn, the meteorite really fell. Stunned, he looked at the ground in front of him with a big hole. The moment the meteorite fell to the ground, countless soil splashed out. The pile of soybeans piled on the farm was ignited by the high-temperature friction and burned instantly. The red flames illuminated the entire night sky. He cursed secretly, and immediately rushed to the warehouse, took out the fire extinguisher, and sprayed foam on the burning soybeans. Fortunately, the falling meteorite was not large in size, and only a few soybeans were ignited. Lin Fang quickly put out the fire. Panting slightly, he wiped the dust on his face and looked at the deep pit created by the meteorite, which was emitting mist and heat. After the heat and smoke dissipated, Lin Fang looked at the existence in the pit in shock. This is not a meteorite, but a small spaceship that is silver and glows in the night. What the hell? Did I see the aliens coming with my own eyes? After rubbing his face and confirming that he was not dreaming, Lin Fang threw down the fire extinguisher and ran to the warehouse again. A moment later, he walked to the pit with a shotgun in his hand. For his own safety, in case these aliens kidnap him, he thought it would be best to take some protective measures. Click, click, click. As he watched, the cabin of the spaceship slowly opened. He subconsciously raised his shotgun and aimed at the spaceship. As a gun enthusiast, he had indulged in real shooting in the weeks since he came here. Now holding the gun, he was sure to shoot the other party the moment he appeared. However, what shocked him was that there was no scary-looking little gray man in the spaceship. Instead, it was a cute baby sucking his fingers. Baby? Lin Fang, who was a little confused, took a deep breath to calm himself down. Let's see the situation first. The golden-haired baby seemed to see Lin Fang outside, stretched out his short legs, and was about to crawl out. Danger. Seeing that the other party was about to fall out of the spaceship, Lin Fang didn't care about other people and immediately slid down the slope of the deep pit. Bang! He staggered to the bottom of the pit, put down the shotgun, and caught the baby who was about to fall out. The naked baby didn't seem to feel the coolness of the night. He was held in Lin Fang's arms, and he giggled instead. Holding the baby, Lin Fang frowned and looked into the spaceship. There was a white blanket in the spaceship, and he took the blanket and wrapped the baby. Why did he feel that this scene looked familiar? Holding the baby who closed his eyes and dozed off, Lin Fang stared at the spaceship in front of him. Kansas, farm, baby in the spaceship. Wait, isn't this the scene of Superman coming to Earth? Could it be that the world he traveled through was the American comic world? And the baby he was holding now was Superman? Hiss, he took a breath of cold air and immediately felt that the baby in his arms was even cuter. If he became Superman's father, well, it seems that Superman's adoptive father didn't end well. But he is not the kind of noble person who would sacrifice himself to save others. You are my son. If you don't care about your old father, I will sever the father-son relationship with you. This kind of shameless father is the father he wants to be the most. He was so happy that he even thought about how to aid his son in the future. His life would be changed from then on. Besides, Superman was very strong when he was a child. He could even lift a school bus. Could he lift 10 harvesters with just one finger? He didn't have to do the farm work himself, and he didn't have to find helpers. This kid could do the work of 10 people. Just when Lin Fang thought that his life was about to start, he suddenly noticed that there was a watch in the spaceship. The watch was silver and glowed with cold light, flashing a cold light in the night. Lin Fang hesitated and reached out his hand, but the moment he touched it, the watch actually deformed. The continuously extending mechanical strap wrapped around his left wrist as if it had life. Click, with a crisp mechanical sound, the watch fit tightly on his wrist. Lin Fang, who was both surprised and suspicious, immediately felt dizzy. At the same time, a large amount of information poured into his mind. 2 minutes later. It's over. After receiving the information transmitted to him by the watch, these 3 words instantly appeared in Lin Fang's mind. The baby in his arms turned out not to be Superman, but Homelander. Lin Fang took a deep breath and looked at the baby in his arms in shock. When this kid grows up, he won't blow himself up in anger, right? After all, you can never judge whether a person's evil is determined by innate genes or acquired environment. Thinking of the Superman in his hand becoming Homelander, Lin Fang felt a little complicated. But he had no choice. The message just now told him that he was already bound to this baby. Once the other party died or was abandoned before adulthood, he would also be punished. So wearing a watch is equivalent to signing a bully clause? 10,000 alpacas ran through his heart. He raised his hand and stared at the watch that forced himself and the baby to be bound. On the dial, a pointer slowly turned. The system reminded him that once the pointer completed a circle, it would be the arrival of the next meteor shower. The meteor shower will continue to send superpower babies. In other words, there is a great possibility that he will get Superman in the next meteor shower. Hope has not been completely cut off. There will be a chance next time. He breathed a sigh of relief, gently put down his wrist, and looked at the baby Homelander. Call me Daddy. Chapter 2. I want to trade with you. No, you can't touch this. Peter, also known as Lin Fang, snatched a Playboy magazine from Zoo's hand at the fastest speed. The baby crawling on the ground burst into tears when he saw his favorite toy being snatched away. Looking at Zoo, who had shown the characteristics of a little pervert since childhood, Peter was a little speechless. He looked at the girl on the cover of the magazine. She had a strong figure and a plump chest, exuding a mature woman's breath. Sure enough, this guy had shown a strong yearning for mature women since childhood. For your health, this thing is not allowed. Peter threw the magazine into the cardboard box. The cardboard box made a creaking sound. Peter then pulled the cardboard box over and found that it contained many CDs. The Distortion, The Smashing Pumpkins, The 9 Inch Nails, all of which were popular bands in this world collected by the original body. On top of the CDs was a pile of comic books, with a Tyrannosaurus Rex staring at it from above, and the Transformers sandwiched between the books. Peter picked up the dinosaur model and handed it to Zoo, who was crying loudly. After getting the new toy, Zoo stopped crying immediately, staring at the dinosaur with his two round eyes. Seeing that the other party stopped crying, Peter breathed a sigh of relief. Whether it was his previous life or his original body, he knew nothing about how to take care of a child. After all, he had never even been married, so how could he have experience in taking care of a baby? Milk powder, baby diapers, cribs, toiletries, etc. These are all necessary. He casually put a piece of butter candy into his mouth and let it swing between his left and right molars. If you want to save trouble, it's best to hire a wet nurse or a nanny, but unfortunately, he shook his head slightly. All his movable assets now add up to no more than $1,000, so how can he hire a nanny? Although he didn't know the charges for nannies in the United States, it was definitely not something that his $1,000 could afford. Just as he was thinking about his future livelihood, he suddenly heard a strange honk sound. He looked down and found that Azu had put butter candy in his mouth without knowing when. The candy was stuck in his mouth, and Zoo, whose face was red from holding it in, made a painful grunt. Peter was shocked to see that the other person was stuck with candy. He quickly picked him up, used the Heimlich maneuver, held his chin, and patted his back with his hands. After patting him a few times, there was a bang sound, and the candy that Zoo spit out hit the floor heavily. It was like the explosion of a fired bullet, tearing the air apart, hitting deep into the floor, and deeply embedded in it. Looking at the candy embedded in the floor, Peter took a deep breath and looked at Zoo, who was holding his finger and looked fine. This kid has such a talent at such a young age. Spitting out candy is like the effect of a bullet fired from a gun. He took out a piece of candy and wanted to put it in the other person's mouth again. But when he thought of this inhuman behavior, if the other person really choked to death, it would be a lot of fun, so he had to give up in the end. In the afternoon, Peter drove his car and rushed to Walmart supermarket. He was going to buy some baby products. The old Toyota car made an annoying noise as soon as it hit the road. Fortunately, the roads in the town called Smallville where he lived were neatly paved, without potholes, and smooth and flat like the back of a beetle. Peter put Zoo in the child safety seat at the back of the car and said to him, "Don't move, otherwise I will confiscate your toys, understand?" Zoo played with the Tyrannosaurus Rex with his chubby hands and looked up at Peter's face. Probably thinking that his father wanted to snatch his toys, he put the Tyrannosaurus Rex behind him. After rubbing the golden hair on the other's head, Peter started the car. 20 minutes later, Peter parked the car next to the Walmart supermarket and put a coin into the old parking dispenser. Then he opened the car door, picked up Zoo and walked towards the supermarket. There was a downhill road between the parking lot and the supermarket. When Peter walked to the middle, he suddenly heard exclamations from all around. "Oh my God! My child!" Peter looked up after hearing the voice. He found a baby carriage rushing towards him at lightning speed. There seemed to be a baby boy lying in the out-of-control stroller. At the top of the ramp, a young woman in her 20s was running down with all her might, trying to reach out and grab the stroller. Unfortunately, the distance between them was getting farther and farther, and the mother was getting more and more desperate. Bang! At the critical moment, Peter reached out and grabbed the stroller that was rushing down. The chasing mother saw that the stroller was stopped, ran over quickly, and excitedly picked up the baby boy in the stroller. "Oh my God! God!" The excited and incoherent mother hurriedly thanked Peter. "Thank you, sir, thank you. If it weren't for you, I would have almost made a big mistake. I just bumped into it and the stroller slipped out of my hand." The woman didn't care about the mud on her body, and thanked Peter excitedly. "It's nothing, Mom. If it was my child, I believe someone would help," Peter, holding a Zoo, said with a smile. The young woman felt that Peter was a good person even more. "Thank you. Thank you very much, sir." The woman, who didn't know how to express her gratitude, hugged Peter excitedly and expressed her gratitude to him again. "I'm Martha Kent, sir. Maybe we can exchange contact information. I mean, my husband will definitely want to thank you in person." Martha wanted to exchange contact information with Peter. Peter looked at the baby in the stroller and wanted to refuse. But he suddenly remembered something. "Wait, you said your name is Martha Kent, isn't this the mother of Superman Clark? That is to say, He cast a shocked look at the baby in Martha's arms. "Is this black-haired baby Clark?" Coughing, he tried to sound normal and asked, "This child, can I know his name?" Seeing Peter suddenly cast his eyes on her child, Martha felt a little strange. "Clark, his name is Clark Kent," she said her son's name. The moment he heard the other party say Clark Kent, Peter's heart stopped. "It's Superman." The Kryptonian baby he reserved was actually intercepted by Martha and his wife in advance. Although Azu is not bad, how can a postnatal Superman have the fragrance of an idealistic Superman? He originally thought that there was a high chance that he would find Superman during the next meteor shower. Now that he knew that Superman had fallen into someone else's hands, he was a little upset. He wanted to ask Martha, "Can we switch? New author, new book. Please recommend and collect, thank you." Chapter 3, Supermarket Terror, Azu's First Merit. Walmart. After Martha knew that Peter was a single father, she enthusiastically picked out baby products for Peter. Martha put Zu in the stroller and squeezed him with Clark. Zu, who was stronger, pushed Clark aside and hit Clark with a Tyrannosaurus Rex toy in his hand. Since Martha was explaining to Peter which milk powder was more suitable for infants under 1 year old, she didn't notice that Zu was bullying her son. Outer packaging, taste, nutrition and cost performance are all things to consider. Martha put 2 milk powder cans in Peter's shopping cart. "You can try these 2 brands, which are also what Clark has been using." Peter wanted to tell her that he wanted to let Zu live freely, and there was no need to be so particular. But when he thought that this might make him look too disdainful, he rationally kept silent. After finally choosing the goods, the 2 lined up at the checkout counter to check out. Peter held Zu, and Martha pushed the stroller and talked to him, unaware that a crisis had already arrived. 2 minutes later, a man walked in at the end of the people queuing to check out. The other party was wearing dark Ray-Ban sunglasses and a V-neck t-shirt. The man in sunglasses looked at the crowd in the supermarket and took out a Glock pistol from his clothes. Then he raised the gun straight into the air and pulled the trigger. Bang! The gunshot rang out, and everyone in the supermarket was silent for a second. When they realized what was happening, the crowd immediately exploded. Screaming, restlessness, and riots occurred in the supermarket in an instant. The man in sunglasses seemed to enjoy this terrifying atmosphere. He aimed his gun at the target, and with a bang, the door was blown to pieces. Peter was also startled by the gunshot. He knew that $0 shopping was popular in American supermarkets, but he didn't expect to encounter it so soon. Before he could react, he was dispersed by the terrified crowd. Peter hugged Azu and wanted to leave the supermarket quickly. But he didn't expect that there was more than one gunman. Another gunman hidden in the crowd immediately opened fire on the crowd. It seemed that the gunman was not aiming for robbery, and began to shoot indiscriminately at the crowd. On the other side, Martha was holding Clark, running in panic, but she almost tripped over a body lying face down. Looking at the body on the ground, she suddenly felt an urge to vomit in her throat. Although she immediately covered her mouth, she still couldn't suppress the whimpering. However, her cry was not alone, and people in the supermarket cried one after another. Some people hid in the aisles, and some people rushed out of the door but were shot instantly. Then, a thin man slowly walked towards her. The other party also wore sunglasses, and his khaki pants were stained with something that was not sure whether it was food or motor oil. He raised his pistol, and with a bang, the bullet flew over Martha's head. Just when she was about to make a sound, a hand suddenly covered her mouth. In her terrified eyes, Peter, who was holding Azu, appeared from behind her. Peter motioned her to be silent. He held a stainless steel double fork in his hand. Martha knew that it was used for barbecue. Peter and Martha hid behind the shelves. Clark and Azu were also obedient and didn't make any sound. Martha was so nervous that she didn't dare to breathe. The gunman walked over, and Martha was just about to take a breath. The next second, the other party suddenly turned around and pointed his gun at her. Martha was stunned for a moment. At the moment when the other party pulled the trigger, Peter, who had moved to the gunman's side at some point, suddenly stabbed the man's neck with a double fork in his hand. The gunman, who didn't react, turned his head to Peter in astonishment. Peter responded with a clumsy turn. The double fork extended from the side of his neck, looking like a lever. Blood gushed out from around the wound, like a gurgling fountain, and began to soak the gunman's neck and the collar of his t-shirt. Plop! The gunman fell heavily to the ground. After killing the gunman, Peter's heart was beating wildly. In his previous life, He was just a steel worker and had only seen killing people on TV. For his own life, with his adrenaline soaring, he actually killed the gunman directly. Could it be that he has the talent to be a killer? He was thinking wildly in his mind, and his hands were moving fast, preparing to pick up the gun. Bang! Another gunman found Peter, who was about to pick up the gun, and shot him, and the bullet passed by his body. Peter didn't care about picking up the gun and hid behind the shelf as quickly as possible. On the other side, Martha looked at Peter, who killed the gunman, in astonishment. She didn't expect Peter to be so brave. Her heart was also beating wildly. When she saw Zhu, who was put down by Peter on the ground before, she immediately picked him up. Another gunman raised his pistol angrily and fired at the shelf where Peter was. The bullets smashed the items on the shelf. "Come out, bastard!" Martha, who was hurt by the fragments from the shelf, used her body tightly to block the damage for the two babies. "Patrick," Martha shouted to Peter, "if I die unfortunately, can you help me take Clark out?" She had already started to make the worst plan. "It's not that far yet." Peter frowned, and suddenly he found that Zhu, who was held by Martha, had a faint red light flashing in his eyes. He remembered that Homelander seemed to have a laser eye. Thinking of this, he immediately took Zhu from Martha. "Very good, Zhu. Think about angry things, stimulate your talent, you can do it." Peter ignored the bullets flying above his head. "Hurry up and shoot your laser eyes." Zhu tilted his head, made a yi-ya sound, and handed the Tyrannosaurus in his hand to him. But the red light in his eyes did not show any sign of strengthening. Peter's heart instantly fell to the bottom. He had awakened his superpowers in the morning, why didn't it work now? Looking at the Tyrannosaurus in his hand, he hesitated for a moment, and with a ruthless heart, he twisted the head of the Tyrannosaurus off. Seeing his beloved Tyrannosaurus being twisted off, Zhu immediately pursed his lips. The red light in his eyes began to grow stronger. The eyes that accumulated dangerous energy seemed to be about to shoot out powerful laser energy. Peter rushed out holding Zhu and Martha's stunned and shocked eyes. "Stop, I surrender." Hearing Peter's voice, the gunman stopped shooting. Seeing Peter coming out holding a baby, the gunman looked at this scum with disdain, thinking that he had found a shield for himself. "Scum, are you going to die?" "No. I'm going to die." He pinched Zhu's white and tender little butt, and Zhu finally cried out with a wow. Zizzy, red lasers shot out from Zhu's eyes in an instant. The lasers, which emitted powerful power, moved quickly as Peter pinched Zhu's head and turned it. Hoolah! The horizontal laser cut the gunman's body in two in an instant. With a bang, the opponent's upper body fell on a row of shell ornaments and shelves filled with beach snowballs. The moment the items fell to the ground, they all shattered. Smelling the strong smell of blood and witnessing everything in front of her, Martha wanted to say something, but found that her mouth was not controlled by her brain at all. Chapter 4 Can I be Clark's godfather? I just stuck the forks into his neck. I don't know what happened afterwards, Peter said to the third police officer who was interrogating him at the Smallville Police Department. He had repeated similar words countless times. We retrieved the supermarket's surveillance and obtained the testimony of the people at the scene. They said that you confronted that guy at the time. The sturdy white policeman slammed the transcript on the table with a bang. Don't try to lie, cowboy boy, I know you are a restless guy. Peter leaned forward. I think I should be self-defense, officer. I killed the gunman and saved people. I deserve respect and praise. Why am I being interrogated as a prisoner? He already knew that the robbers in the supermarket broke all the cameras during the shooting. So he was 100% sure that the supermarket's surveillance did not capture any footage of him and Zhu. In addition, he had already agreed on a confession with the only witness, Martha. As for Zhu's problem, the system had provided him with a legal adoption certificate, so he was not afraid of the other party's investigation. Just when the white policeman was speechless, the door of the interrogation room was suddenly knocked. A female police officer stood outside and said to him, "Sir, they're here." The white policeman nodded and walked quickly outside the interrogation room. A few minutes later, the other party came back. "You can go now." He stepped forward to unlock Peter's handcuffs and warned Peter, "But don't leave the town. We will talk to you at any time." "Thank you." Peter thanked the other party calmly. When he walked out of the interrogation room, Martha, who was waiting anxiously, immediately walked quickly with Zhu. "God? Are you okay?" "I'm fine." Peter took Zhu from Martha's arms. Zhu, with a rosy face, seemed to have recovered from the previous Tyrannosaurus Rex incident. He was having a lot of fun with the new toy in his hand. "I'm Jonathan Kent." The man next to Martha stretched out his hand to Peter. "Thank you so much, Mr. Patrick." Martha's husband Jonathan thanked Peter sincerely. He had already learned the whole story from his wife. Although he was skeptical about what his wife said, that the baby's eyes shot out lasers to cut the robber in half, he was grateful to Peter for saving his wife and son. "You're welcome. In fact, I like Clark very much, too," Peter shrugged his shoulders and said. After a few words, Jonathan invited Peter to his home. Peter did not refuse and got into the car with the couple. In the speeding car, Peter slowly clenched his fists and felt the changes in his body. It seemed that his strength had increased a lot, and his vision and senses had become more acute. The scenery flashing outside the window gradually became slow and stagnant under his sight. He stared at the watch on his left hand. Before, he killed the gunman in the supermarket, and he thought it was the bloodiness and explosive power stimulated by adrenaline. But now it seems that it won't be that simple. Even if his adrenaline exploded, he couldn't stab the double fork into the opponent's neck so steadily and accurately. Is it the power given to him by the watch? As he was thinking, the car drove away from the town center and rushed to Kent Farm. Tall trees stood on both sides of the road, oak trees wrapped in dark and damp bark, each one like a silent and solemn sentinel, or a judge. 20 minutes later. "We're here." The car stopped in front of a farm. Jonathan opened the car door and introduced, "This is our farm." Martha helped Peter carry Zoo down. Jonathan's grandfather lived on the farm. He inherited the farm and gave up his college life for it. "You always have to make choices in life, don't you? At least I got you and Clark. If I left the farm, we wouldn't have met. You always have your own reasons, Jonathan." Martha suddenly slapped her head. "Oh no, I left Clark to Neil to take care of him and forgot to pick him up." She handed Zoo to Peter. "Sorry, I have to go to Neil." Looking at his wife who left in a hurry, Jonathan smiled at Peter. Even after getting married, Martha still does things a little confused. "She's good," Peter said to Jonathan, "a competent mother." This is not his compliment. The future Superman did not grow up crooked, thanks to Martha's education. If Clark fell into the hands of a pair of bad parents, he might become another native. "Yes, Martha is a good mother and wife," Jonathan said happily. Night. Martha and Jonathan prepared a sumptuous dinner for Peter. "So, you don't know who John's mother is, John?" The name Peter gave to Zoo is exactly the same as his name in his previous life. Putting down the tableware, Martha asked Peter in surprise. "Yes, I adopted him, and I'm not married," Peter lied without blushing or beating his heart. Martha turned her head and looked at Zoo playing with Clark on the ground. She thought of the scene when she and her husband picked up Clark on the farm last month. Before, in the supermarket, Martha hesitated, not knowing how to ask this question. "That's his talent." Peter tasted a bite of the beef stew with potatoes and said, "I just discovered it recently. John has an unusual talent. When he is angry, he will burst out with incredible power." Martha nodded and looked at a Zoo who was crawling on the ground. "When I was at the police station, the police repeatedly asked me about the situation at the scene. I told them that I closed my eyes because I was afraid at the time," she murmured in a low voice. "In fact, even if I tell it, no one will believe it, right?" Listening to his wife's words, Jonathan next to him frowned slightly. Thinking of the spaceship that sent Clark to his farm, and comparing the specialness of the two children, he suddenly had a guess that he thought was absurd. Could it be that John was also brought by the spaceship? Then what is the relationship between John and Clark? "I hope you can keep the secret for John's growth." Peter's words interrupted Jonathan's meditation. Of course, Jonathan was stunned for a moment and nodded repeatedly. After thanking the two, Peter walked to the two babies and picked up Clark. "In fact, I think Clark is more talented." He took the opportunity to propose to the couple to recognize Clark as their godson. In order to avoid being betrayed by his future countrymen, Peter decided to adopt a godson. In case this kid turned against him, he would have a godson to take care of him. Hearing Peter's wish to be Clark's godfather, the couple looked at each other. "Of course it's okay," Martha said immediately. For Peter, who saved her life, she felt that there was no problem at all in being a godfather. Clark, who was held by Peter, suddenly uttered an unclear word to him. "Dad." Chapter 5. "Are you threatening me? There is a dark force floating in the air of Smallville. It needs us to go out. Are you ready, Clark?" the blonde boy said righteously, holding a toy gun in his hand and wearing a flag cloak that didn't fit him well. The black-haired boy, whom he called Clark, said unconvincedly, "This is not fair, Zoo. We agreed that I should be the commander this time and you should be the soldier." Zoo, the native of the boy, pinched his waist and said, "The commander should be a stronger person. I am stronger and smarter, so Clark, you should be the soldier boy." Clark immediately exposed his words, "But Aunt Neil gave us a test last time, and my score was higher than yours. That's because I didn't take it seriously." Zhu blushed and immediately changed the subject. "Hey, there's a monster over there, look at my fist." As he said that, he rushed into the cornfield. "John, maybe we should return the flag cloak you are wearing," Clark shouted to Zhu. The national flag on the roof of the farm was used as a cloak by Zhu. He was afraid that the Godfather would reprimand them when they returned. But seeing that Zhu didn't care, he had no choice but to follow him into the cornfield. Plop! As soon as he entered the cornfield, Zhu threw him down. He was about to resist, but he heard Zhu say in his ear, "Don't move. Listen. They are coming." Clark became nervous after hearing such nervous words from the other party. He swallowed his saliva and tightened his Zorro eye mask. Really, listen, these dark demons are going to attack us, we have to be prepared." Clark really believed that the dark demons were coming. He held his breath nervously and pricked up his ears to catch the movements around him. At first, there was the rustling sound of the wind blowing through the leaves, and the heavy breathing of Zhu who was pressing on him. Then he heard noisy and chaotic sounds coming into his ears. It was the sound of cars passing by the road and the sound of sheep running on the grass. Then there were more chaotic sounds. He also caught the whispering voices. Buzz! There was a harsh noise in his ears, and he felt a sharp pain. He covered his ears and groaned in pain. Startled, Zhu got up quickly and looked at him helplessly. "What's wrong with you, Clark?" "My ears hurt a little." Clark's pain came and went quickly, and soon he returned to normal. He covered his ears and asked Zhu in fear, "Am I deaf?" "No," Zhu said angrily. "If you're deaf, how can you hear me talking, you idiot?" He helped Clark up. "We have to go home, otherwise Dad will be angry." Although Zhu wanted to continue playing, he and his father agreed to go home before 5 o'clock in the afternoon. The two chased and played with each other and soon came to the farm. "Dad, Clark's ears are almost deaf," Zhu shouted loudly as he ran into the farm. But Clark noticed that there were several cars parked on the farm and immediately pulled Zhu. Zhu also noticed this situation and stopped shouting. The two walked into the living room and saw Peter talking to several men in suits. "Dad, Godfather," the two greeted each other in a low voice. Peter glanced at the two and said, "John, Clark, go upstairs." "Okay." The two hurried upstairs. After seeing his two adopted sons go upstairs, Peter turned to face the guys in suits in front of him. 6 years have passed since he picked up Homelander. Homelander and Superman have grown into little boys. But the years have not left any traces on his face. His appearance is still exactly the same as it was 6 years ago. In Martha's words, he seemed to be favored by God and was given the magic of eternal youth. God's favor is naturally nonsense. The real reason is that the watch he wears on his hand not only gives him stronger and stronger physical fitness, but also greatly slows down his aging speed. Strength, endurance, speed, reaction and flexibility have all been greatly improved. He estimated that his skin can even withstand the impact of small caliber bullets now. As time goes by, the physical fitness enhanced by the watch will become stronger and stronger. He estimated that if he lives another 100 years, he will definitely become Superman. Does this count as becoming stronger by lying down? Sure enough, no matter what era, lying down is the most suitable lifestyle for oneself. The only pity is that he glanced at the watch on his hand, and the pointer was about 1/5 of the way to a complete circle. "I thought the pointer would finish quickly and the meteor shower would come soon. I didn't expect that after 6 years, there was still no meteor shower." You are calculating in years. If he hadn't been given the ability to resist aging, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to wait for a few meteor showers when he died of old age. Mr. Padrick, the man with a hooked nose sitting opposite him, noticed that Peter was looking at his watch and thought he was impatient. He smiled and said, "Luther Energy Group is going to build a chemical plant in Smallville. We have carefully selected the site and determined the scope of the chemical plant, and your farm is within our plan. We hope to acquire your farm. Of course, we will pay enough compensation." As he said that, he took out a check from his suit and put it on the table. Peter looked at him coldly. "What if I say no?" Although the farm does not mean as much to him as it does to Jonathan. But the meteor shower is coming on the farm. If he sells the farm, how can he pick up super-powered babies in the future? Besides, he was not short of money. In the past few years, he went to Metropolis to rob a lot of gangsters of their dirty money. His superhuman physique made it easy for him to deal with those gangsters. Hearing Peter's blunt refusal, the smile on the hook-nosed man's face disappeared, and his tone became as cold as steel. Generally speaking, the Lether Group will not treat those collaborators harshly, but if they are those who do not cooperate, our methods will not be so gentle. Peter narrowed his eyes and looked at him with a frown. Are you threatening me? No, how could it be? We are a legal company. I am just talking about normal business competition methods. The hook-nosed man stood up and stretched out his hand to Peter. I hope you will change your mind, Mr. Patrick. Peter did not shake hands with him, and said lightly, my answer will never change. At the same time, at the corner of the stairs on the second floor, Azu eavesdropped on the conversation between his father and the hookman and clenched his fists. Chapter 6 The Broken Brothers. Mr. Spiker, what should we do next? Report to the board of directors, the subordinate asked the hook-nosed man in the car speeding on the rugged road outside the farm. Spike shook his head with a sinister expression and said, no, that would make the board think that we are not good at our job and can't even handle such a small matter. Then what should we do? His subordinate said with a frown. Continue to negotiate with him? Maybe he is unwilling to sell the farm because he is not satisfied with the conditions we put forward. Negotiate? I will not negotiate with a greedy man. Sitting in the back of the car, watching the scenery flashing outside the car window, he said coldly, he is not qualified to negotiate conditions now. The old and sick wolves with the lowest status in the wolf pack are not qualified to ask the leader of the wolf pack to give them more food. This is against the rules. If I give in to his conditions, he will lose respect for me, he said with dissatisfaction in his tone. He is a guy who is pushing his luck. As long as I give in a little, he might dare to take advantage of me. I am not his father. Just as he compared Peter to a sick wolf in the wolf pack, he suddenly noticed a flash of red light in the distance. What is that? Surprised, Spike immediately turned his head to the front of the vehicle. Red leaves? They are quite beautiful, he said to everyone while crossing his legs. But soon, in his astonished eyes, the red light in the distance kept getting bigger. Buzz, the red laser instantly rushed towards the moving car. It was like a light of death carrying a strong destructive momentum. The red laser barely brushed past a car and hit the trees on the roadside, instantly piercing the tree trunks. This is not a red leaf, but a death ray of impact. Shit, realizing that he was attacked, Spike, who was horrified, immediately shouted, damn it, turn around, turn around. The panicked driver immediately stepped on the brakes. Squeak, the car driving at high speed made a harsh sound. As a result, because of the high speed, the car accidentally hit the tree stump on the roadside, making a bang sound. The car lost control and rushed directly to the deep ditch on the side of the road. Bang! Boom! Boom! The car rolled down continuously and finally overturned heavily at the bottom of the ditch. Spike rolled over and over in the car, and his head, back and arms were hit one after another. The severe pain almost made him faint. When the car finally stopped rolling, the surroundings fell into deathly silence. Then a groan was heard in the car. He opened his eyes and wiped his sticky head. The pungent smell made him realize that it should be his own blood. Enduring the needle-like pain coming from his whole body, he raised his head slightly and looked at the others. The others in the car were awake and should be fine. Cough cough. After coughing a few times, he said to the others in a difficult tone, call the emergency number. He turned over, gasping for breath, and touched the clothes he had placed on the back seat. There was a mobile phone in the clothes, which could be used to call the emergency number. Suddenly, his eyes suddenly saw a child standing on the road. The other person's figure was a little blurry in the night, but a pair of red eyes were particularly eye-catching. He couldn't help but shudder. The red light in Zoo's eyes went out, and he turned around. A smile appeared on his lips that Peter was very familiar with in his previous life. But the next second, the smile froze. He was shocked to see Clark standing in front of him. John, Clark glanced at the car below, and then looked at Zoo. You did it. I don't know what you are talking about. I have to go home. Zoo pretended to be stupid and walked forward. Clark grabbed his clothes and said, I just saw that your eyes can emit something like lasers. He couldn't believe that his good friend could be like a superhero. No, I didn't. Peter told him not to show his superpowers in front of outsiders. He respected his father very much, otherwise he wouldn't have caused these bad guys to get into a car accident just to vent his anger for his father. You shouldn't do this. Although Clark envied Zoo's ability, he felt that it was wrong to do so. At this time, Clark's Kryptonian ability had not yet awakened, and he thought he was just an ordinary person. What? Azu looked at him angrily. I'm punishing the Dark Lord, Clark. He wanted to take away my family's farm and threatened Dad. No one can do this to Dad. Clark's face flushed. But you shouldn't hurt others. The Godfather said that it's wrong to hurt other people's lives. The punishment for bad people is not to hurt others. Azu was angry that Clark didn't stand on his side. They want to hurt Dad, is that right? But they haven't done it yet. It's very dangerous. Clark continued to insist on his point of view. Although he was young, under the education of Jonathan and Martha, his character of sticking to the bottom line has begun to show. Because that's not your father, Azu said angrily. Because your father is Jonathan. Clark looked at him in shock. No, the Godfather is also my father. You are not, because you don't love him at all, so you don't care if someone wants to hurt him, Azu said excitedly. You are at my house, eating, sleeping, and that also accompanies you to draw and play football. He felt more and more wronged as he spoke, feeling that he was a child who lacked love. It was as if Clark was his biological child, and he was picked up. Although Peter would also draw and play football with him, he thought that the other person spent more time with Clark. I hate you, Clark, because Dad cares about you more, because you took him away, Azu said his true thoughts. This shocked Clark, who had never noticed Azu's sensitive heart. But you don't stand by him, and you still want to help those who want to hurt him. Azu felt that he and his father were betrayed. As he said that, he pushed Clark forward and pushed him to the ground, and then walked forward without looking back. After walking for a while, he suddenly regretted it. So he secretly looked back and found that Clark was still lying on the ground. He wanted to go back and help him up, but he couldn't wipe his face at all. It's his fault anyway, why should I help him? Azu kept muttering on the way. I'm not wrong, it's Clark's own fault. Although he said this, he soon became frustrated. Chapter 7 Waste Paper Basketball Game. Dad, are you worried about something? John, on the farm, after dinner, Peter and Azu played a game of waste paper basketball. The two competed to see who could throw the ball of waste paper into the trash can first. This was naturally not difficult for Peter, who had gradually become a superhuman. But in order to make the game interesting, he did not throw the ball of paper accurately into the trash can, but deliberately threw it off. One thing, Clark and I had a quarrel. Azu threw the ball of paper into the trash can with a dejected look. With a click, the ball of paper fell into it accurately, but because he used a little too much force, it was quickly bounced out. This made him feel even worse. In the past, when he played this kind of game with his father, he could always control the strength accurately. He knew that his strength was a little too strong, so he had been learning to control his strength with the help of his father. Fight? What did you quarrel about? Peter crumpled the waste paper into a ball, then turned around to face the young Azu. Azu said with a guilty conscience, I said something a bit too much, so you think you hurt him? Right, a little bit. Peter threw it forward casually, and with a pop, the paper ball was thrown into the trash can. He clapped his hands. It seems that my luck is better tonight. I threw 3 first. He knew why Azu quarreled with Clark. Clark liked to stick to him and liked to share everything with him. This time he also became a little snitch and told him about Azu's use of laser eyes and almost cutting the car in half. He was not surprised that Azu did such a thing. After all, this kid liked to use laser eyes to cause trouble. In his previous life, he used laser eyes to shoot chickens and used laser eyes to split the gunman in half when he was a child. And he found that Azu's personality had some problems. Although not as bad as in the previous life, he was not as stable as Clark. For example, in the previous life, Azu lacked love, longed to be recognized, and cared about others' opinions of him. Now he also has such signs, sensitive and longing for love. For example, if he paid a little attention to Clark, he would immediately feel abandoned. In his previous life, Azu had an erratic personality, and he would shoot people in the head at any time, and then he would smile calmly in the next moment. Now this kid also has such a personality. He was still laughing and playing games in the previous second, and in the next second he pushed down and beat up the children who whispered bad things about him. Now, it is not only a personality problem, but also murderous. He was also ready to kill the hawk hook man who threatened him, but he didn't want to do it this way. After all, this method is not only unsafe, but also easy to be detected. However, he still has a positive attitude towards Azu's idea of defending himself. Many thoughts flashed through his mind in an instant. Peter coughed and said to Azu, who was in depression, since you think you have hurt Clark and you also realize this mistake, it proves that you don't want this friendship to end, right? Azu blinked. Right, So what do you think is the best way to deal with it? I should apologize to Clark, correct? But, Azu hesitated and said, but will this? He thought that this would make him look wrong and he would not be able to raise his head. He cares a lot about what others think of him. Peter touched Zu's blonde hair, and he knew what he wanted to say. No, it will only make you look more mature than Clark. Zu's eyes immediately lit up. Dad, do you really think I'm more mature than Clark? Of course. Zu's depressed mood immediately improved. Besides the apology, Peter asked him, do you have anything else to tell me, John? Zu hesitated. No, really? Stared by Peter's sharp eyes, he immediately felt guilty. I think I may have done something wrong. Although he wanted to hide it, he still cowed under Peter's gaze. Peter not only educated him gently, but also punished him occasionally. For example, he was not allowed to watch TV for a day, and he had to eat vegetarian food for 3 consecutive days. Although it was not a physical punishment, it was more terrible than that. Zu would rather take a beating himself. Anyway, he was thick-skinned and would not feel any pain. So he carefully told this story of his laser eyes causing the hook-nosed man to have a car accident. Did I do something wrong? Dad, Clark said I did something wrong, Zu asked Peter in confusion. No, it shouldn't be judged by right or wrong, Peter said to him. You hurt him because you tried to hurt us, right? Yes, Zu nodded repeatedly. He wanted to hurt Dad. Yes, so they should be punished, but you shouldn't do it this way. Peter tried to teach Zu to pay attention to methods. On the one hand, not everyone in that car will be punished by death, and on the other hand, it is easy to be discovered by others. Peter said to him, before you have enough power, Zu, you can't expose your ability. I know, Dad. Zu nodded as if he understood. Very good, go and rest. Good night, Dad. Zu said good night to Peter and prepared to go upstairs to rest. Don't forget your milk, drink it before going to bed, Peter reminded him. Okay, Dad. Zu ran upstairs thump thump thump. Maybe drinking milk is engraved in Zu's genes. Now, Zu, who grew up on the farm, also has a honey-juiced obsession with milk. Even without Peter's reminder, he would drink it all in one breath. After Zu went upstairs, Peter sat down and casually took out the letters in the mailbox during the day. They were all leaflets from the Baptist Church of Christ and financial advertisements from the bank. After a rough browse, he pulled out an obituary letter for a funeral. Lewis Wilson. Looking at the name of the letter sender, Peter frowned slightly. This seems to be the cousin of the original body? After his soul passed through the original body, he rarely contacted distant relatives, and the memory of these people has become a little vague. After opening the obituary letter, he found that this cousin also lived in the town of Smallville. The youngest son of this cousin unfortunately passed away in a car accident. The funeral will be held the day after tomorrow, and the other party hopes that he can come to attend. Attend the funeral? Peter put the letter down and looked at the night outside. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 8: The Ominous Breath of Death. Let's pray for him, because no matter whether it is a man or a woman, they are like flowers in the valley, blooming today and withering tomorrow. Human life is like a season, coming and going. Let's pray. In the church, the pastor was saying the blessing with a heavy expression. Peter, wearing a black suit, sat in the middle seat, and Clark and Azu sat on his left and right. The two quarreling boys have reconciled after Azu's formal apology. Azu tilted his head and whispered to Peter, Dad, what happens after people die? Some people think we will go to heaven or hell, and some people think we will be reborn like children. Carnation? Like Rose in the movie Audrey Rose, it's not carnation, it's rebirth. Peter corrected his pronunciation. The English pronunciation of rebirth is similar to carnation. Wait, Peter looked at Azu. Isn't Audrey Rose a horror movie? I told you, John, you can't watch horror movies. Azu saw Peter's serious face and immediately threw the blame to Clark. Clark told me about it. I haven't seen it. Clark's little face immediately became more depressed. He didn't like the atmosphere of the church in the first place. It was his first time attending a funeral in the church. He felt awe and was a little quiet and uneasy. The pastor on the pulpit had finished his blessing. Clark explained to Peter with a bitter face, I accidentally saw it on TV, The Godfather. Yeah, next time you see it, you can ask the adults to change the channel. Clark nodded obediently. Dad, Is there anything else? Azu wanted to hear more about death. Clark had a kind of awe of death, but Azu didn't have too many feelings about death. Catholics believe in heaven and hell, but they also believe in a place called the border of hell and a place called purgatory, while Hindus and Buddhists believe in nirvana. The two boys listened quietly. Peter spoke more slowly. There may be more sayings, but the fact is, no one knows what will happen after death. People say they know, and they say so because they believe what they say because of their faith. Do you know what faith is? Both of them shook their heads. I don't know, Peter said to the two. It's like this. We are sitting on a chair now. Do you think my chair will still be here tomorrow? Yes, of course. Then you have a kind of faith. You believe it will still be here, and I believe it too. Faith is believing what something will be like or believing what it is like. Understand? I understand. Clark nodded affirmatively. Zoo scratched his head and said, but we don't know if it will still be here. Maybe a thief who steals chairs may break in and steal it. Right, Clark said to Zoo. Then you have no faith? My faith is the same as Dad's. Dad. Zoo's eyes turned to Peter. Dad, what do you believe in? My faith? Peter was stunned. What is his own faith? Money, power or worldly power? It seems that he wants all of them, but it seems that these are not very important to him. Just when he didn't know how to answer, the pastor's voice rescued him. Hearing the pastor's words, please ask the coffin bearers to come to the front, Peter gave the two a command and walked forward. He greeted Lewis Wilson, who was wearing glasses and was about 30 years old. Although this unfamiliar cousin had the pain of losing his family on his face, he seemed to be very strong. After a few words of greeting to his cousin, he looked at Clark and Zoo. He found that the two had run away. Shaking his head, he focused on the coffin in front of him. Afternoon. After the funeral, Peter drove Clark and Zoo back to the farm. Stevens, this old house was playing on the car radio. Dad, you must not know what we saw, Zoo said to Peter in a boastful manner. We saw the dead lying in the coffin. Hearing Zoo's words, Peter's brows immediately frowned. That's too disrespectful, John, Peter scolded Zoo, the culprit. Without guessing, we know that he was the one who urged Clark to go with him. I know I was wrong, Dad. Zoo hung his head dejectedly and admitted his mistake to Peter. Seeing that the other party quickly admitted his mistake, Peter did not continue, and the car quickly arrived at the farm. Late at night. Ding-ling-ling, the phone on the farm suddenly rang. Peter, who had already fallen asleep, put on his clothes, walked into the living room and picked up the phone. I'm Peter Patrick. Yes, okay, I know. After hanging up the phone, Peter's brows immediately frowned. He put on his clothes, went upstairs to see if Zoo and Clark were asleep, and then went downstairs to take the car keys from the wall. The night outside was dark, and the patter of small raindrops fell on the ground. The headlights of the car pierced the dim night. Peter drove the car and soon came to the cemetery he had visited during the day. There were several police cars parked around the cemetery, and the dazzling red light flashed in the night. After Peter got off the car, he walked towards the place where the coffin was buried during the day. Many people gathered around, whispering and talking. Lewis, Peter walked up and greeted his cousin with a dull expression. Lewis heard the voice and hurried forward. Next to him were two policemen following him. Peter asked his cousin, Lewis, what happened? It's little Terry, his body is missing. Lewis said something that made Peter frown. He held an umbrella and walked to the grave, and found that the grave had been dug up and the body inside was missing. Did someone steal the body? We can't rule out this possibility. A white policeman who Peter was somewhat familiar with stepped forward and said. The other party was burly and had sharp eyes. We meet again, Mr. Patrick. After so many years, you seem to have not changed at all. You are. Peter looked at him in surprise. Are you Officer Ryan? The other party was Ryan Schneider, who was in charge of investigating the case of the Walmart supermarket gunman 6 years ago, and was also the officer who interrogated him. Yes, I didn't expect Mr. Patrick to still remember me. Ryan came up and shook his hand. I'm sorry to bother you, because you were one of the 4 people responsible for carrying the coffin to the burial. So we wanted to find you to understand the situation. Chapter 9. Who stole the body? Besides him, there were 3 other people who carried the coffin to the burial. 2 of them were Lewis' strong nephews, and the other was his younger brother. Was there anything unusual during the burial? Or did you notice anything unusual? Officer Ryan asked the 4 people. Probably not. One of Lewis' nephews recalled the situation at that time. We were burying the coffin, and Norma, the funeral director, and his tall and strong son were standing by the hearse waiting. Everything seemed normal. Officer Ryan nodded and took off his rain-soaked police hat. What's happening now is not normal. Smallville town hasn't encountered such a thing for several years. Stealing corpses is not an ordinary crime. As he spoke, he cast his eyes on Peter. Patrick, do you have anything to add? No. Peter shook his head, indicating that he didn't know more than the police. Really? He stepped on the muddy mud and walked to Peter's side. The last Walmart shooter case is not over yet, and we have to deal with it again this time. Peter looked at him in surprise. It's been 6 years. Is Officer Ryan still investigating? Of course. I will catch the murderer no matter how long it takes. He glanced at Peter, turned around and put on his police hat. Peter stared at his back, his eyes narrowed. Peter drove a black Toyota SUV to send his cousin and his family back. Cousin Louis, who was sitting in the back seat, looked dazed, as if he had not recovered from the huge blow. His wife Vanessa looked worried, looking at her husband hesitantly, as if she wanted to say something. I'm sorry for what happened, Peter comforted his cousin. I'm fine, Peter, thank you for sending us home. Louis forced himself to thank Peter. He asked Peter, is John okay? He's fine. He was asleep when I left. You're a competent father, Peter. Azu is not your biological child, but you have been taking care of him. You even delayed your marriage for this, Louis' cousin said with emotion. Although he didn't deal with his cousin much, he knew a long time ago that Peter had adopted a baby boy who was not related to him by blood. Not bad, Peter replied casually. He now has the ability to live forever. It is estimated that when Azu falls into the midlife crisis, he will still be in his 20s. He can live for hundreds of years, so why a rush to send himself to the grave of marriage? After dealing with Louis for a few words, Peter concentrated on driving. 10 minutes later, Peter sent Louis and his wife home. In the living room, Louis poured him a cup of hot coffee. Peter comforted him, I believe the police will catch the murderer soon. I hope so. Louis took a can of beer from the refrigerator. He seemed to want to confide his pain to Peter. It's all my fault. If I had taken good care of little Terry, maybe he wouldn't have run to the road. Don't say it. Peter picked up the coffee. Everything is over, Louis. Louis sighed. Peter, you don't know what he was like when he was 6 years old. He was well-behaved and obedient, and liked to pester me to tell him about his wonderful ideas. Then the slightly drunk cousin told a series of warm past events, which were vivid, clear and touching. After Peter listened patiently for a while, he became a little impatient. Just as he was about to say goodbye to this cousin, he suddenly noticed the traces of dragging on the lawn outside. Bang! The sound of a beer can falling to the ground was heard. Peter turned around and looked back, and found that a beer can in Louis' hand fell to the ground, and he himself was drunk. Pushing open the door, Peter walked to the lawn outside. The drizzle was still falling, and the grass on the lawn fell in the same direction, with bits of dirt with a fishy smell all over it. Peter's superhuman senses made it easy for him to identify the smelly mud as coming from the cemetery he had visited during the day. Is the suspect who stole the corpse here? Peter's eyes became more serious. He took a step forward and followed the smell back into the room. Cousin Louis was still drunk and unconscious. Peter walked out of the living room and followed the smell slowly upstairs. The smell became stronger and stronger in his nose. It smelled like freshly cut grass, but also like the smell of fruiting bodies. In short, what he smelled was the smell of decay and complete stagnation. Although it was faint and ordinary people might not feel it, Peter's senses had already surpassed ordinary people. On the second floor, the master bathroom. There was a dark shadow behind the shower curtain, swaying slightly in the night. Hoolah! Peter pulled open the bathroom curtain. There was no figure behind the curtain, but a canvas. There was a lot of mud on the canvas. The stench from it was even stronger. This is staring at the canvas in front of him. Peter frowned slightly. This seemed to be the canvas that wrapped little Terry for burial. He turned around. Boom! A thunder pierced the darkness of the night, illuminating Peter's expressionless face. In other words, it was actually Louis himself who secretly dug up the body. He dug up his own son's body with his own hands? No. It couldn't be him. The other party's painful and self-blaming expression just now did not seem to be fake. If it wasn't him, it must be his wife, Vanessa. Why did she do this? Peter frowned. He walked out of the master bathroom and continued to follow the faint smell forward. The rain outside was getting heavier, and Peter's footsteps echoed in the corridor. At this time, Louis' wife, Vanessa, was standing in a storage room at the end of the second floor. She stood behind the door nervously, holding a dagger in her hand, listening to Peter's footsteps approaching. On the ground behind her, there was the body of her son that she had secretly dug up. Plop. Plop, her heart was beating wildly, listening to Peter's footsteps, as if waiting for the final judgment of fate. In order to prevent Peter from discovering the secret, she could only kill to silence the witness. But she had never done such a thing, so her hand holding the dagger was shaking slightly, and her heart was beating wildly. Da. 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 The footsteps were getting closer and closer, until they stopped in front of her door. Plop. Plop, the two faced each other, separated by a door, and the sound of Vanessa's heartbeat vibrated her eardrums. Click, the broken door handle of the storage room was gently turned. Vanessa, with a fierce look in her eyes, raised the dagger upwards. I would like to ask the readers to collect and recommend it, thank you. Chapter 10 Kryptonite appears. To Vanessa's surprise, the door lock was only slightly turned, but did not open. Peter, who was standing outside the door, suddenly remained motionless strangely. He neither pushed the door in nor walked away. The air fell into silence. Vanessa's nervous heart rose to her throat. Finally, when she was about to collapse, Peter's footsteps were heard outside. When the footsteps gradually faded away, Vanessa collapsed to the ground with a thump. Breathing heavily, fortunately, the other party did not come in. She slowly threw down the dagger in her hand. A few minutes later, she staggered and walked to her son's body. Looking at the night outside, her eyes were fierce. No matter what, I will make you come back to me, Terry. After Peter left, she went to the kitchen and found a roll of tape, tied the pick and shovel together, and then made a strap with a rope and put the tools in the strap. After completing all the preparations, she carried her son's body to the trunk of the car. Her husband Louis's driver's license was recently revoked, and the car had been in the garage for a long time. Buzz, the car roared and sped through the rainy night. Vanessa drove the car and soon arrived at a forest outside the town. The quiet forest was filled with the sound of the wind. The rain slapped on her hair, and for a moment she even felt an uncontrollable fear in her heart. Was she really going to carry the body through the woods and walk to that place? But when she thought that this might be the only way to save her son, she could only grit her teeth and move forward. 30 minutes later, panting, she finally arrived at her destination. This was a pit surrounded by rocks, covered with a lot of fallen leaves. The green soil was slightly exposed under the cover of the dead leaves. She put the body package on the ground and knelt on the muddy ground to catch her breath. Then she used the prepared tools to dig a hole in the ground. The soil soaked by rain was very soft. Vanessa quickly dug a big hole and put her son's body in it. After putting the body in, she filled it with soil again. By the time she finished all this, she was too tired to stand up. After sitting there and resting for a while, she stood up and walked back to the roadside step by step. When Vanessa's back disappeared, a figure stood out from behind the bushes. Peter stood in the woods, looking at the place where Vanessa buried the body, frowning slightly. Before, in front of the door of the storage room, he did not push the door in. Vanessa, hiding at the door, was easily captured by his senses. The other party's undisguised killing intention naturally did not escape his perception. Although he could easily push the door open and kill the other party. But considering that the other party is Louis' wife, it is not suitable to kill rashly. In addition, he is more interested in what the other party wants to do. So he did not push the door in, but left the scene, monitored and followed the other party. Sure enough, I discovered the secret. Walking to the pit surrounded by stones, Peter looked at the newly dug pile of soil below. Why did this woman dig up the body and bury it here? Is this land different, and has some magical power to revive her son? Staring at the pit in front of him, Peter fell into deep thought. Looking up, he suddenly caught a glimpse of green light. Jumping into the pit, Peter reached out to lift a dead leaf and picked up a green stone on the ground. He held the cool green stone in his hand. Is this a meteorite? No, it should not be an ordinary meteorite. Looking at the strange atmosphere around him, Peter had some guesses. The next day, early in the morning, Clark and Zoo sat at the dining table at Padrick Farm to eat breakfast. Dad, Zoo picked up the milk and drank it all in one gulp. Can you buy me an eagle kite? Do you want to fly a kite? Yes, it would be better if you could buy me a kite string. Zoo proposed the idea of buying a kite. I see someone in town flying a kite. Maybe I can experience the feeling of flying. I mean, holding the kite is like flying myself. What about Clark? Do you want it? Peter asked Clark. Before Clark could answer, Zoo said first, "Clark hasn't come out of the funeral yet. What's wrong?" "Clark." Peter cast a look at Clark. Clark thought for a moment and said, "I feel that the atmosphere of the funeral is a bit depressing, and it always reminds me of bad things." Peter nodded. "Clark, because you see people's sadness, you will also feel sad, right?" "Maybe." Clark felt that the oatmeal in front of him was not as delicious as before. He raised his head and asked Peter with some doubts, "Godfather, is this normal for me?" "Of course, Clark. Sadness is also a part of normal human emotions." Peter touched Clark's hair. "People who have just lost their loved ones will begin to grieve within 3 days of the death of their loved ones, and it will last for 4 to 6 weeks. Most people will be like this, but as time goes by, people's feelings will turn into another emotion, just like the rainbow with diverse colors. Intense grief will gradually subside and become a kind of heartache, and heartache will evolve into mourning, and mourning will finally become memories. This process may last for half a year to 3 years. Clark was a little frustrated when he heard this. It will last for another half a year. That's not your relative, so Clark, don't worry." After comforting Clark for a few words, Peter put a lead box on the table. "What is this?" Zoo and Clark's eyes were immediately attracted by the lead box. Before Peter could speak, Zoo immediately opened it impatiently. The faint green light instantly caught the eyes of the two. Clark felt uncomfortable when he came into contact with this light. Zoo did not notice Clark's abnormality and directly took out the stone and handed it to him. "Look, Clark, what a beautiful stone." Clark reached out to take it. The moment he touched it, he immediately felt a burning sensation. He shook his hand back and made a hissing sound of inhalation. "Pa!" The stone that was thrown out was caught in Peter's hand. Seeing Clark throw the stone out, Zoo immediately asked with concern, "Clark, what's wrong with you?" "I don't know, it seems like I was burned just now." Looking at Clark, who was uncomfortable, Peter nodded slightly. Sure enough, as he guessed, the stone picked up at the burial site last night was kryptonite from Krypton. As a Kryptonian, Clark's body will enter a state of rapid weakening when he encounters kryptonite. Although his superpowers have not yet fully manifested, kryptonite still has an effect on him. Chapter 11 Clark. "Lara, I'm here." Aunt Neil, 6-year-old Lana showed her head from the stable. She wore a low hat, and her tan skin could not hide her natural beauty. "I'm feeding Tyson. He's been in a bad mood lately." Tyson is a pony in the stable, and Lana always likes to ride her for a walk in the stable. Although Aunt Neil always reminds her that she shouldn't ride a horse at her age. "You can feed it some soybeans, but I already fed it this morning." A young woman came out of the room. "I got up at 6:15 to shovel horse manure, change water, and feed horses. This is not an easy job, so I can help you, Auntie, with some work," Lana said sensibly. "No, you're still a child. What you should do is enjoy a carefree life." Neil came over and patted Tyson's butt in the stable. "Like reading a book or going to the amusement park to play. I don't like those. I like riding horses." Neil smiled and said to her niece, "Riding a horse is not an easy thing. Horses can be very stubborn, rude, and timid animals. You will spend a long time to teach an animal that can't understand your inner anxiety. Sometimes the horse will kick you off." Lana bit her lip and said, "Tyson is not such a horse. The temperaments of animals are all similar." Neil did not continue to talk about this topic, but asked Lana, "Your cold has just recovered. You should rest more in the room." Although Lana wanted to continue riding Tyson and secretly go outside for a stroll. But after seeing her aunt's serious expression, she swallowed what she wanted to say. At noon, after her aunt took a nap, Lana secretly ran to the stable and untied Tyson's reins. Satisfied, Lana rode Tyson around the horse farm, imagining herself as the knight in the picture wearing a shirt, jeans, riding boots, and a cowboy hat. Soon the female knight was not satisfied with just circling around the horse farm. She rode Tyson out of the horse farm and walked on the road in the town. Although she was only 6 years old, she was very skilled in riding. After walking around the nearby roads for a few laps, Lana rode the horse to go back. But unexpectedly, Tyson's horse leg was entangled by a line on the road. Tyson, whose leg was entangled, was immediately startled. After a scream, he ran forward. Frightened, Lana bent down tightly and grabbed the rope with her hands. Bang! The frightened horse ran into the field, and Lana, who was holding the reins, was almost thrown off. With a blank mind, she had forgotten all the measures that her aunt taught her to take when the horse was frightened. On the other side, Clark and Azu looked at the frightened horse and Lana, who was holding the reins tightly and was in danger of being thrown off at any time, and were stunned. Azu looked at the eagle kite with a broken line in his hand, and then looked at the kite line entangled on the horse's hoof, and immediately realized that he had caused trouble. It was the kite string that fell from the sky that entangled the horse's hoof and frightened the horse. He had ridden horses with his father before, and he knew when horses would be frightened. Swallowing his saliva, he shouted to Lana, "Hold the reins tightly, don't be thrown off." Clark looked at the scene in front of him with a dull expression. Crash! The frightened horse ran into a forest. Lana's body leaned tightly against the horse's back, but she was still hit by the branches. The bumps and weightlessness hit her. And she even thought she would be thrown out in the next second. She was completely frightened, and tears kept pouring out of her eyes. Just when she thought she was going to be thrown off by the horse, a figure suddenly broke into the woods. Bang! Just as Lana let go of the reins, the stranger who suddenly broke and jumped onto Tyson, grabbed the reins, and hugged Lana in his arms. Peter jumped on the horse's back and gently pulled the reins to one side, while reaching out his other hand to reach the horse's mane. The horse was pulled, its head bent to one side, and it gradually calmed down and regained its composure. After controlling the frightened horse, Peter rode out of the woods. He had ridden a lot of horses in the past few years of living on the farm. As a farm cowboy, these operations can only be described as basic exercises. "Lana? Are you okay?" Peter asked the frightened little girl who was almost curled up in his arms. He knew this niece of Ms. Neal. The last time they met seemed to be half a year ago. I didn't expect that she had grown so tall in half a year. Looking up, Lana's eyes were full of tears. "Uncle Padraic," she wiped the tears from her face and looked at Peter in surprise. Because she was too shocked that Peter could suddenly fly over like a bird, jump on the horse's back and control Tyson, she was a little too surprised. "Uncle Padraic, are you a bird?" Lana even forgot her fear just now and asked stutteringly. "I'm not a bird, I'm a flying knight." Peter touched Lana's hair and said. "Girls just feel different from boys." He even had some hope that the baby in the spaceship that fell was a girl. Raising a baby girl should be less troublesome than raising a baby boy. Although she would cause trouble, she would not cause trouble every day like Zoo and Clark. He glanced at the kite string at the horse's hoof. When Lana heard Peter say that he was a flying knight, she immediately thought of the handsome knights in the picture books she had read. The knight image was gradually replaced by Peter's image. Her little face suddenly turned red. Peter rode Tyson and hugged Lana out of the woods. Zoo saw Peter appear and immediately ran over with a kite. "Dad, you were so handsome just now." He saw Peter's behavior of controlling the frightened horse and thought his dad was so handsome. "Really? Then who frightened the horse?" After being glared at by Peter, Zoo immediately retracted his head. "Sorry, Dad, I didn't mean it." Zoo apologized guiltily. "Godfather, the string broke when I was flying the kite." Clark took the initiative to say that it was his fault. He glanced at Lana in Peter's arms, his face instantly turned red, he lowered his head and whispered, "It's none of John's business." "Huh?" Peter glanced at Clark. "Why are you blushing?" He looked at little Lana in his arms in confusion, and saw Clark secretly glancing at her from time to time. He took a deep breath. Could this kid be in love so soon? "You are only 6 years old, and you know how to like girls?" I thought Azu was the little pervert before. After all, this kid had done all kinds of crafts in his previous life, and often challenged various difficult tricks. Unexpectedly, you, the seemingly honest Clark, are the little pervert. Chapter 12. I do whatever I want. After riding a horse to send Lana back to the horse farm, Peter went to visit Jonathan's family. "I heard about the Lewis family, Peter." Jonathan poured Peter a cup of coffee. That was an accident that no one wanted to see. Martha sat next to her husband and listened to their conversation quietly. Occasionally, she cast a glance at Peter. 6 years have passed, and Peter really hasn't changed at all. It seems that time has really stopped for him. As a woman, she is a little envious of Peter's ability to maintain his youth. She will definitely ask Peter how to maintain his secrets someday. Jonathan didn't know that his wife was coveting Peter's secrets, so he asked Peter, "Do you have any clues about the murderer who stole the body?" "No, not yet." Peter deliberately concealed the fact that Lewis' wife was the suspect. This sleeve-type tomb is very simple. After the funeral ceremony, the coffin is lowered into the tomb, and then the church celebrant takes 2 top covers, ties them together with wire, and then covers the tomb, so it is easy to pry open, Peter said as he took a sip of coffee. He put down the cup and asked Jonathan, "Jonathan, have you heard about the living dead?" Living Dead. Jonathan was stunned. You mean the Living Dead in George Romero's movies? Yes, I've seen a lot of them in movies. Peter shook his head. No, I mean in reality. He suspected that the land contaminated by kryptonite could revive the dead. Otherwise, it couldn't explain why Vanessa secretly buried her son there. But the resurrection of the dead is bizarre and impossible from any angle. Even if kryptonite has magical powers, it can't revive a dead person. At most, it can make the corpse stand up again and become a walking corpse without consciousness. So he wanted to ask Jonathan if there were similar legends in the town of Smallville. Once such a legend appeared, it proved that something similar had happened in the town. Someone had buried a corpse in that land, and the dead were resurrected, so Vanessa, who saw it with her own eyes, believed it. Of course, it is also possible that Vanessa is a mental patient, and then all the above inferences will be overturned. I haven't seen it. Jonathan thought Peter was joking with him. Unless the zombie apocalypse has arrived, Martha next to him said, I have seen strange animals that look like walkers, but they are not human beings. Hearing his wife say this, Jonathan immediately looked at her in surprise. Are you sure you are not joking, Martha? Of course not, Martha recalled. Do you remember? Bill's family has a plot hound. Of course, that hound is very fierce. It's like this. A month ago, I saw this hound being hit by a car with my own eyes. The hound was already dead at that time. The strange thing is that half a month ago, I saw it again. Well, maybe it was rescued at that time, Jonathan said without comment. But the hound has become more aggressive, and it has a strange odor. Jonathan asked his wife, so you think it has become a walking corpse? I don't know. Peter mentioned the walking corpse, so I connected them together, but it may be that old Bill has raised a new dog that looks exactly the same. Who knows? Peter listened to Martha's words and nodded thoughtfully. That's Bill's house. Clark pointed to a house and said, he has a protester dog at home. Maybe. Clark, who was a little afraid of dogs, hesitated and said, maybe we can ask the Godfather to help us pick up the kite. Clark's eagle kite fell at old Bill's house. Although he wanted to go in and pick it up, he was a little scared when he thought of the other party's house guarding hound. We can't need Dad's help for everything, but I'm a native. Nothing can hurt me. I can do whatever I want. Azu pinched his waist and said confidently. Although he didn't understand why his father gave him such a nickname. But the name sounds cool. He likes this nickname. With a contemptuous look at Clark, Zu walked towards old Bill's house. When he bent down to pick up the kite, he noticed that the door of the warehouse in front of him suddenly opened a crack. Zu, who suddenly had a bad feeling in his heart, narrowed his eyes and took a step back. Bang! The next second, the door of the warehouse was slammed open. A huge hound rushed towards him. Shit! Zu imitated Peter, spit out a swear word, and ran out. Clark, who was waiting outside, suddenly heard a low dog barking. Then, in his shocked eyes, a hound rushed out behind Zu. Seeing Zu being chased by the dog, Clark immediately ran out at the fastest speed. In the face of disaster, Clark didn't care about the friendship between brothers. Help! While running, Zu opened his mouth to call for help. But there was no one around, only the vicious dog chasing behind. Clark had already run away, but upon hearing Azu's cry for help, he mustered up the courage to return. Clark, holding a stick, shouted to Azu, here, run this way, John. When Azu saw Clark appear, he immediately ran towards him. Swoosh! Clark swung the stick and swung it at the vicious dog that was rushing over. Unexpectedly, the opponent's movements were extremely agile, and Clark did not hide him, but fell to the ground instead. The vicious dog ignored Clark and rushed towards Azu. With a bang, Azu, who was standing unsteadily, fell to the ground. At the same time, the vicious dog also rushed over. At the critical moment, Azu pinched the neck of the vicious dog with his hand to prevent the vicious dog's sharp teeth from biting him. The fishy smell from the opponent's mouth almost made him faint. Gritting his teeth, Azu pinched the neck of the vicious dog with his hand. The red light in his eyes became more and more intense. Finally, when the vicious dog was about to bite him, the laser in Azu's eyes suddenly emitted. The hot line of sight, which was emitting strong heat, went straight through the neck of the vicious dog. The hot line of sight cut out horizontally, and the neck of the vicious dog was pierced through by a hot knife like butter. The movement of the vicious dog, which was originally ferocious, suddenly stopped. The neck of the vicious dog fell directly on Azu. The sticky and smelly black blood poured down like a waterfall. Azu's little face was instantly covered with dirty blood. Clark stood up and saw a shocking scene in front of him. Azu was standing not far away, holding a dog's head in his hands. His face was covered with dirty blood, and his whole body was also splashed with blood. Azu, who was holding the dog's head, with a face covered with dirty blood, showed Clark a smile that was uglier than crying. Chapter 13. This is not Pua. Shit, Peter couldn't help but swear as he looked at Zu holding the dog's head, and his face was covered in blood. This kid smiled with blood all over his face, which really felt like the previous life. Peter walked over quickly and picked up Zu. What happened? He took off his suit and helped Zu wipe the smelly blood off his face. Gudong. Clark swallowed his saliva and looked at the body of the hound on the ground. It attacked me and John, and then John's laser eyes. Okay, Clark, I know what happened. Peter interrupted Clark. You help John wipe the blood off. I'll drive the car over. Okay. Peter drove over quickly and carried Zu to the passenger seat of the car. Before getting in the car, he looked at the body of the hound on the ground, hesitated for a moment, and finally moved the body to the trunk. Padrick Farm. In the bathroom, Peter helped Zu wash the blood off his body. Dad, are you feeling uncomfortable? No, I just feel a little weird. Zu wiped the turbid water mixed with dirty blood off his face. So blood smells like this. What smell? Peter stopped what he was doing and looked at Zu. Did Zu awaken some strange attribute from now on? If Zu became the countryman who liked to blow people's heads off in his previous life, he would be at a big loss. I don't know, it's like fireworks suddenly exploded. Although I was scared but also very excited, Zu described his feelings. Oh, but this smell is not very pleasant. Peter wiped it for him and said, if you don't want to make yourself look embarrassed, don't get yourself covered in blood, because that's not cool at all, Dad. Yes, Dad doesn't think it's cool to be covered in blood. Peter felt that he had to correct him in advance. This kid slaughtered a group of experimenters who bullied him in the Vought company in his previous life. His laser eyes cut people into pieces. The blood on his body was really a bit perverted. Okay, I won't do it next time. Zu's mind is very simple. Since his father doesn't like this, he won't let it happen in the future. Dad, am I a monster? After struggling for a while, Zu asked Peter, my laser eyes, no one else has such an ability. Peter thought that Clark's laser eyes had not awakened yet, otherwise he would immediately turn the tide and turn from the bully to the bully. No, you are not a monster, Zu, this is your talent, the talent given to you by God. Talent, Zu blinked. Yes, talent, it is given to you by God, and it is also a kind of responsibility given to you. Dad, what responsibility is it? Peter would naturally not say the greater the ability, the greater the responsibility. After all, Zu is not Spider-Man. The responsibility to protect the family, that is me, Dad, and Clark, correct? Peter felt that the imprint of the family was implanted in Zu's mind. What if this kid doesn't obey in the future? Wouldn't he be able to be as an old father with incompetent rage? Ahem, he coughed, reminding himself that this was not Pua, but just helping Azu to shape the correct values. After all, family man is better than the people in his previous life. After helping Azu clean up, Peter went to the storage room behind the farm. He put the hound killed by Azu on the table and observed the marks on the body. According to the stiffness of the hound's body, it should have been dead for some time. But the hound's head was just cut off by Azu, and it was clearly dead for no more than a day. Has it died long ago? Peter held the table with both hands, staring at the corpse that exuded a foul smell. In other words, this hound was already a zombie when it attacked Azu? Turning around, he raised his hand and stared at the kryptonite that appeared in his hand at some point. This kryptonite stone caused the land to mutate and form something like a corpse-raising ground. The creatures buried there may become something like zombies after a period of time. And then, he just needs to observe his cousin's family and confirm whether his little nephew has come back to life. After putting away the kryptonite, Peter's eyes became more serious. It seems that he has to buy a large freezer to store the zombies. Maybe it will be useful in the future. He pushed the door and walked out of the storage room. Squeak, old Bill pushed the door open and was startled. Hello, Mr. Bill. Peter stood in front of him and greeted him. Seeing Peter standing in front of the door with a serious face, the bald old Bill swallowed nervously. Sorry, Mr. Padrick, I was just about to come to you to apologize. Old Bill knew that his dog almost hurt Azu. Although the dog is dead now, he has no intention of pursuing responsibility. After all, he knows what happened. The hound is not normal at all. I accept your apology, there is no need to come to your house. Peter walked in, Actually, I want to find out something from you. Old Bill poured Peter a cup of coffee nervously. If I knew, I would tell you everything. I heard that your hound died a month ago, but today he almost bit my child. Peter's oppressive eyes made Old Bill a little overwhelmed. He stammered, I raised another hound of the same breed. Really? Peter then threw a stack of photos on the table. Then can you tell me where this is? Old Bill leaned forward and picked up the photos on the table in confusion. His body shuddered. The photos were the burial ground. He let out a helpless breath and curled up his body backwards. Sorry, I made a big mistake. He thought Peter already knew what he had done. Caesar has been with me for 8 years. He is my family. I can't bear to lose him, so I buried him here. I know that even if he is resurrected, he will no longer be him. I just want to see him. At the end, he covered his eyes and cried. What is the origin of this land? Peter asked him with a frown. He has determined that this piece of land does have extraordinary power. It used to be a swamp. About 6 years ago, a meteor shower hit there, destroying the swamp. Coupled with the land ownership issues of the Luther Group, the swamp disappeared. Peter continued to ask, how do you know that there is a place where your hound can be resurrected? Who told you? Chapter 14 Clark's Bedtime Story. It was Father Norma from the church. He told me about the wonders of that land. Old Bill had a painful look on his face. I know that's not normal, but I always think about how Caesar would jump around beside me. You mean Father Norma? Peter frowned. Isn't this the priest who presided over Louis' funeral? As a clergyman, doesn't he know that this is a blasphemy against the God he believes in? Peter had to wonder if this priest was a fake priest, or if he had no faith at all. I don't know. Old Bill shook his head. Father Norma is a devout believer on weekdays. Maybe he just doesn't want to see me suffer. Pain and death are part of life. To abandon them is to abandon life itself. Peter stood up and put the photo away. Seeing Peter was about to leave, Old Bill breathed a sigh of relief and stood up to see him out the door. He was really afraid that Peter would continue to pester him. Once I think of any problem in the future, Peter said to him, I will visit you again. Old Bill nodded helplessly. Of course, Padraig Farm. After dinner, Peter looked at Clark in front of him in surprise. You said, you want me to read a story to you, Clark. He didn't expect Clark to let him read a story to him. Usually, Azu would let him read to him before going to bed. But as Azu got older, he rarely made such a request recently. Yes, I want to hear a story, Godfather. Clark looked at him eagerly. Peter originally wanted to investigate Father Norma at night, but seeing Clark's eager expectation, he finally compromised. Father Norma would not run away, and the investigation could be done another day. Azu, who was watching TV nearby, curled his lips when he heard Clark ask Peter to tell him a story. In Clark's room, Peter was holding a book. Since Clark likes to play with Azu on the farm, there is also a room for him on the farm of Padraig. She said hysterically, I just thought of this. Why didn't I think of it before? Why didn't you think of it? Think of what? He asked. 2 more wishes, she replied hastily. We only made 1 wish. Isn't 1 enough? He asked suddenly. Not enough, she cried ecstatically. We can make another wish. Kneel down quickly, and wish that our son can be reborn. Peter read to Clark Jacobs's The Monkey's Paw. The story roughly tells that a retired British soldier accidentally got a magic monkey's paw from an ancient Indian monk, and it can fulfill 3 wishes. When talking about the couple's resurrected son, knocking heavily on the door, Clark was so scared that he curled up in the quilt. Ahem, Peter coughed and said to Clark, maybe I can tell you another story, like the story of the 3 little pigs, or Cinderella. Clark, this kind of dark story was not originally in Clark's bedtime story. But for some reason, Clark suddenly asked him to read this story. Although he also felt that The Monkey's Paw was somewhat similar to the story he experienced in the town of Smallville. Godfather, Clark stuck his head out from the quilt. Does the monkey's paw's wish really have a price? No, Clark, wishes have no price, but greed has its price. Clark asked puzzledly, is Old White greedy? But they are obviously very scared. Why do they continue to make wishes? Peter put down the storybook. Clark, fear is one of the emotions that humans can never control. People avoid this emotion in their hearts, while allowing themselves to peek at the disgusting happiness brought by this emotion. Like Old White's family, although they have disgust and fear of the evil represented by the monkey's paw in their hearts, they are more unable to conceal the greed for money buried deep in their hearts. Clark stuck his head out, snuggled up to Peter, and imitated Peter's sigh and said, humans are really complicated. You're right, Humans are a contradiction, Peter asked Clark. Can you tell me why you want me to tell this story today, Clark? Clark hesitated and moved closer to Peter. Dad, I can tell you a secret. What secret? I was dragged by Zoo to see the boy lying in the coffin in the church. A confused and frightened look appeared on his face. In the evening, I seemed to see him again. You mean little Terry? I don't know his name, but I did see him. His face was very pale and his eyes were very strange. Clark described the scene he saw at that time. My mother dragged Zoo and me to Aunt Nell's house. I saw him when we passed Louise's house. It was behind the curtain. My eyes and ears can always see things far away, so I thought of the story of the monkey's paw that Zoo told me. Zoo said this story is the story of the resurrection of the dead. He regretted it a little. It turns out that this story is so scary. Peter listened to Clark's words and nodded slightly. So Clark, you didn't tell Zoo about watching horror movies before, but he watched it secretly, right? Clark looked at Peter's serious face and nodded subconsciously. Yes, Peter was a little unhappy. Zoo is really a kid who'll tear down the roof if he is not punished for 3 days. It seems that he needs to teach him a lesson. Shaking his head, he temporarily blocked out the thoughts in his mind and said to Clark, you may have seen it wrong, Clark. The dead cannot be resurrected, because death is a sacred thing and it is irreversible. I understand. Clark immediately drew inferences from one example and said, just like Old White, their son is dead and can never come back, otherwise something terrible will happen. Right, yes, reversing death will be punished, just like Old White's family. Peter rubbed Clark's black hair. Go to bed early, we have to go to the horse farm to ride horses tomorrow. When he heard about riding horses, Clark immediately became energetic. Thank you, Dad. Squeak. Gently closing the door, Peter walked along the corridor to his room. Has little Terry been reborn? Such a fast speed was beyond his expectations. The next morning, Peter was making fried eggs. In addition to this simple breakfast, his other dishes were all dark dishes. When he was considering whether to hire a chef, the phone rang suddenly. Peter, something happened. Newcomer asks for collection and monthly tickets. Thank you, readers. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 15. More deaths are required. Officer Ryan. Peter lifted the cordon and walked into the living room of his cousin Lewis's house. Many neighbors gathered outside the room to watch the excitement, and several police cars were parked outside. Peter walked in and asked Officer Ryan, what happened? We received a report from Lewis's neighbor, saying that he heard screams here. Officer Ryan pointed to a pool of blood in the living room and said, when we arrived, Lewis and her wife had disappeared. There were only bloodstains and signs of a fight at the scene. Peter frowned and looked around. That means Lewis and his wife may have met with an accident. It's very likely. We have to check the bloodstains at the scene. He patted Peter's shoulder, but it's also possible that the two were kidnapped. Things haven't reached the worst point yet. We will find them as soon as possible, whether they are dead or alive. Peter nodded and fell into deep thought. Clark said he saw little Terry at Lewis's house. He also went to the burial site and confirmed that there were signs of cracking in the soil. In other words, the little Terry that Vanessa buried in the corpse-raising ground returned home like the resurrected son of Old White in The Monkey's Paw. Did the little Terry, who had become a zombie, kill Lewis and his wife? He had seen the cruelty of Bill's hound after it became a zombie. But if it was little Terry who did it, then what about the body? Even if he tore his parents' bodies into pieces, there should be traces left at the scene. It is impossible that there is nothing. Looking at the dark sky outside, Peter always felt that a spreading evil atmosphere was covering this place. After talking to Ryan for a few words, he turned and left. Not long after Peter left, a figure stood in the distance, staring at Lewis's mansion. Father Norma, who was also the host of Lewis's son's funeral, had been observing everything in the crowd. He turned and left only after the police left. Driving the car, the thin priest coughed and slowed down. After the cough subsided, he stopped the car and took out the medicine on the roadside. He has lung cancer and his life is already counted down. He can only rely on these expensive drugs to prolong his life. It's almost successful. After calming down, he whispered to himself and started the car. The car stopped in front of a blue house that was already old and in a mess. The shutters were broken and the walls were covered with vines that were 20 or 30 years old. The dense little feet almost trampled the walls to pieces. A gust of cold wind blew, rolling up the fallen leaves under the porch. The tangled wind chimes made a messy tinkling sound. 2 gray cats were startled by the bells and jumped down the steps and fled to the back of the house. Father Norma pushed open the door, threw the car keys on the table, and then went into his study. After locking the study door, he pushed open the bookshelf with force. Behind the bookshelf, there was an entrance to the basement. Father Norma stepped on the stairs and walked down slowly. The basement was dark and full of a rotten smell. There was an altar in the middle. In the middle of the altar was a thick black human skin book. In order to cure his terminal illness, he had given up his belief in God and began to believe in evil forces. The black magic book in front of him was his lifeline. The black magic book contained black magic to control undead creatures. Which was why he could control zombies. Yes, he could control zombies. After accidentally discovering that the swamp outside the town could resurrect corpses into zombies, he revealed this secret. Sure enough, there were people who believed in resurrection and buried their bodies there. The result was that the corpses turned into zombies and were controlled by him. These are not enough, I have to transform more. He stared at the black magic book, his expression became ferocious. The more dark creatures he controlled, the stronger his power would be, and he could cure his terminal illness. More people need to die. He looked at the calendar on the wall with a gloomy look. A date on the calendar was crossed out with a big red pen. Are you okay, Peter? At the Kent farm, Jonathan asked Peter with concern. I'm fine, but a lot has happened recently. In the living room, Peter stood in front of the window, looking at the cattle grazing leisurely on the farm. After returning to Kent farm from Lewis's house, his expression became a little solemn. I heard about the Lewis family. Tragedy always befalls them. Jonathan thought Peter was grieving for his cousin Lewis. In fact, he didn't have any deep feelings for his cousin's family. But who was behind this? The suspicious priest? He had used his super speed to search the middle-aged priest's residence before, but didn't find anything suspicious. Should he be arrested and interrogated? After the interrogation, in order to avoid exposing his abilities, he should be killed? Jonathan, do you know Father Norma of the church? Peter stopped thinking about it and asked Jonathan about Father Norma. I don't know much about him, but I heard that he has a good reputation. Jonathan thought for a moment and said, he is the host of the Harvest Festival every year. By the way, the Harvest Festival will be held soon. If you want to know more about him, you can communicate with him at the festival. The Harvest Festival Jonathan mentioned is an annual festival in the town of Smallville. The origin of this festival can be traced back to the 17th century at most, when the Puritans who settled in the town of Smallville would organize celebrations to thank God for the good harvest they brought them. During the festival, people would wear traditional costumes and hold various celebrations, such as grabbing bread or apple stalls. Harvest Festival. Hearing Jonathan say that the Harvest Festival was coming soon, Peter subconsciously looked at the watch on his wrist, but forgot that the watch he was wearing was not an ordinary watch. Yes, Clark and Azu should be looking forward to this festival, very much. After Peter drove back home, he asked the 2 boys about their views on the Harvest Festival. The 2 expressed their expectations for the Harvest Festival in unison. Dad, what does bread grabbing mean? Azu asked curiously. Does it mean many people grabbing a loaf of bread? Yes, young people will throw the bread into the air, and then others will try their best to grab it. Clark blinked his curious eyes. What about the apple stand? Peter rubbed his hair. The apple stand activity is that people take out their own apples to sell, and these apples are usually made into applesauce or apple pie. Are you interested? Yes, Godfather. Clark was obviously interested in the apple stand activity. He was already thinking about how to let the Godfather teach him how to make apple pie. Chapter 16, Prelude to Death. 2 days later, the lively town festival was finally held. The whole town was filled with a cheerful atmosphere. Colorful flags were hung in every corner of the town, and the people in the town were wearing special costumes for the festival. The agricultural products sold by the townspeople were placed in the square in the center of the town. The bustling crowd was full of noisy voices. Zoo followed Peter and his eyes were dazzled. Hey, Mr. Patrick, Neil, who was wearing a festival costume, greeted Peter enthusiastically. Lana, who was standing next to him, was wearing a light green dress and a wreath on her head. She greeted Peter shyly. Uncle Patrick, Lana looks beautiful today. Touching the wreath on Lana's head, Peter replied to Neil, just call me Peter. Neil, who is tall and long-legged, has a mature style. She looks unique when she dresses up. Peter glanced at Zhu. He thought that the other party would be like Clark, who likes to chase little girls like Lana. Unexpectedly, Zhu's eyes kept secretly glancing at Neil. Peter was very upset. This kid really didn't change his bad habits. He was reborn, but he was still interested in mature women like in his last life? No. Peter stroked his chin and pondered. In this life, Zhu still didn't have a mother. Would he feel that he lacked maternal love, so he awakened his soul of mature women? Otherwise, he would find a mother for Zhu to make up for his lack of maternal love. Wonder Woman, Aquaman, or Catwoman? These female superheroes he was more familiar with entered his list of choices. There was no way, he only knew so many female superheroes. Normal people were not in his choice range. He was afraid that Zhu would crush people to death with one force. In his self-inflicted troubles, it soon entered the night. In the auditorium in the center of the townspeople began to watch the song and dance performance. Before the performance began, Father Norma, who had not been seen for a long time, finally appeared and went on stage to give a speech. Peter stared at this guy who had been in Metropolis for the past few days and had never been seen, and his eyes narrowed. After a few words, the old man hurriedly walked backstage. After telling Neil to help look after Zhu, Peter immediately followed him out. After Norma left the auditorium, she rushed to her home. Entering the basement of the study again, taking out the black magic book, Father Norma left in a hurry. After he left, Peter slowly emerged from the shadows. Standing in Father Norma's house, he entered the study, pushed open the study door, and entered the basement. The basement was very dark, and the canvas piled in the corner of the wall exuded a smell of old paint. The altar was placed in the middle of the room, and dim shadows stood around like sentinels. Peter's visual senses could still see everything clearly in the dark world. He walked slowly towards the altar. The altar was placed with candles and sacrificial skulls, and the bones sparkled like an amber lagoon. His eyes looked at the yellowed calendar on the wall. On the calendar, someone used a red pen to vaguely draw the outline of a shadow. Looking at everything around him, Peter frowned. Is the old man Norma casting black magic? He immediately linked the resurrected zombies to Norma. At the same time, in the auditorium, there was a soft dark light under the orange-yellow light spot, as if the afterglow of the sunset was burning like a flame. Clark stood outside the dance floor, looking at the crowd inside. If you want to dance, Clark, you can invite a girl. Zhu stood behind Clark without knowing when. I can't dance, Zhu, I can't dance either. It's normal for children not to dance, so you don't need to envy me. Hey, Lana. Zhu turned around and greeted Lana while talking. Hello, Lana greeted the two generously. Clark blushed a little. He secretly glanced at Lana and thought Lana's clothes were very beautiful today. And Lana smelled of Avon soap and orange gum, which made him a little nervous. Lara, we frightened your horse last time, sorry. Clark thought for a long time and finally found a reason to chat up. I have forgotten it. Lana said that she didn't mind. Uncle Padraic saved me. Aunt Neil asked me to thank Uncle Padraic. She had a good impression of Peter and felt that he was the standard knight in her impression. If she were a princess, she would definitely let such a knight protect her. But soon she became frustrated. Aunt Neil said that she was Cinderella. Cinderella turned into an ugly duckling at midnight, which made her a little frustrated. Just as Lana was struggling with why Cinderella's magic disappeared at midnight, she suddenly heard a scream. She turned around in astonishment and saw a scene that she would never forget. The man with a gray face, a face full of sticky blood, and a mouth that was about to tear to the back of his head, suddenly attacked the audience in the auditorium like crazy. Blood instantly spurted out from the neck of the audience being bitten. The monster growled in its throat, and instantly killed the nearest people. All this happened within a minute or two. No one understood what was happening, and everyone was stunned. Clark and Zhu also saw the scene in front of them, and they opened their mouths slightly, looking at the shocking scene in front of them in shock. Then there were screams, and the crowd made terrified sounds and began to flee in all directions. Zhu was the first to react, pulling Clark and Lana to run towards the door. According to the escape knowledge Peter taught him, the first thing to do now is to escape from this closed environment. When Zhu and his 3 people ran to the gate, they found that everyone had the same idea as them. Countless spectators crowded near the gate, but the sturdy door was suddenly locked, and locked tightly. No matter how hard the crowd pushed and smashed the door, the iron door did not move. The crowd that rushed over first was squeezed and gasped, and cursed and cried. Clark, Zoo, Jonathan and Martha were dispersed by the crowd, and when they were swept forward by the flow of people, they shouted their names loudly. Neil was extremely anxious at this moment. Not only was her niece missing, but also Azu, whom Peter asked her to take care of, had disappeared. Fire escape. Azu, who was almost suffocated by the squeeze, immediately shouted to the two people. Dad said that in case of an accident, you can escape through the fire escape. As he said that, he pushed forward with all his strength, pulling away the crowd that blocked his way. Clark counted very clearly. In the middle, Azu slapped two boys and punched a screaming man in the eye. Chapter 17 Desperate Waiting. Azu and the other two quickly passed through the fire door and ran to the short corridor on the left side of the auditorium. Screams and cries echoed throughout the auditorium. The three ran to the exit sign, and a flash of light flashed in an instant. Then there was a scream. Clark turned his head and saw a wire extending from the back of the stage. A man who happened to pass by stepped on the leaking wire and was shocked. The other person's eyes bulged, and his hair stood up, looking like he was dancing. Run, Azu shouted at the two people. Hurry up. Clark had to give up the idea of saving people and ran out quickly with Ilana. When passing through the corridor, a monster suddenly blocked the three people. The other person was crouching on the ground with his back to the three people. After hearing the sound, he turned back suddenly. Azu saw the monster's terrifying appearance and couldn't help but take a deep breath. The other person's face was covered with sticky blood, and a small piece of uneaten internal organs was stained on the teeth protruding outward, and a few drops of blood dripped from it. The monster was covered with blood, and the white clothes were already stained with plasma. After hearing the sound, the monster let out a low growl, stared at the three people with gray eyes that made people feel terrified at a glance, and staggered over. At first, the speed was very slow, but gradually accelerated. Run! Azu had long forgotten that he had laser eyes, and took the hands of the two people and ran forward at the fastest speed. The three ran to the storage yard behind the auditorium and blocked the door with force. Bang! The zombie hit the door from the inside, and Clark and Azu, who were leaning on the door, were almost knocked away. Lana, who was standing outside the door, was already pale with fear. The door was blasted open, and the zombies staggered out. At this time, the three people had already run to the storage yard. Lana could see rows of orange warehouses. This place is open 24 hours a day, but the door of the storage yard is closed. There is a small password keyboard on the door, surrounded by high fences, and barbed wire is placed on the top of the fence. Azu didn't care about so much. He jumped up and pounced on the fence like a shark, and climbed to the top of the fence in 2 or 3 steps. The wire fence was old and obviously neglected. It was not electrified and had long been deaf ears, a decoration. Zu easily bent the wire, but despite this, he was still pricked several times and had several holes in his jeans. With a thump, he flipped over the wire and landed on the other side of the fence. The ground was hard, and when he landed, he was so shocked that his calves and knees were painful and numb. Zu even suspected that he had broken something. After jumping to this side of the wire fence, Zu looked at the warehouses bathed in bright sodium lights. "You jump over, I can catch you," he said to Clark and Lana on the other side of the wire fence. Clark could jump over, but Lana looked up at the wire fence and almost cried. "Lana can't jump over, then leave her alone." "No, how can we leave our companions behind?" Clark looked at Zu in astonishment. "Because she's a burden." Zu pointed at Lana. "She's not our family, Clark, she's my friend." Clark glared at Zu, took Lana's hand and was about to leave. "Don't go, Clark, I can handle it." Zu squatted down, staring at the barbed wire. His laser eyes are not always effective. They will only be fired when facing danger or emotional fluctuations. He stared at the barbed wire in front of him nervously, and red light accumulated in his eyes. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't shoot the laser. With sweat oozing from his head, he tried to recall the tricks his father taught him. Concentrate and then recall the things that made him angry. Angry things? Zu immediately thought of Clark's abandonment of his brothers for Lana. Sizzle! Under the stimulation of anger, the barbed wire was instantly cut by his laser eyes. Lana didn't have time to be shocked, and was pulled into the storage yard by Clark. The three ran through 7 rows of warehouses in one breath, and ran through 5 horizontally. The smell of decay and burning rushed into their nostrils. The 3 of them squatted behind a trash can between 2 warehouses and tried to curl up as much as possible. "What is that?" Clark asked with a trembling voice. Zombies, I've seen them in horror movies, Azu whispered. If you get bitten, you will become one of them, but don't worry, Dad will come to save us. Are you sure, Azu? Clark was trembling with fear at this time. He didn't have this feeling when he was running just now, but once he hid here, fear surged in his heart. I'm sure, because Dad said that as long as I'm in danger, he will come to save me no matter where I am. Clark buried his head. Well, I also believe in the Godfather. The Godfather said he would protect us. Lana, who was hiding in the innermost, didn't speak. She bit the back of her hand desperately to stop herself from crying. She was about to turn from Cinderella into an ugly monster. She didn't know if her knight would come to save her. The three of them didn't speak, and the air fell into a deathly silence. Clark raised his head and looked towards the auditorium. In the distance, a flame rushed into the sky, and above the flame, steel roof panels, wood and paper were scattered all over the sky. The air was filled with the smell of oil and smoke. The main street was lit up with lights, as if a flash gun was lit. Clark suddenly whispered to Azu. I saw it. His voice was trembling. Azu looked at him. What did you see? Clark recalled the terrible scene just now, the monster that chased us just now, the zombie you said. He is the cousin of the Godfather. Azu swallowed his saliva. You mean, the Uncle Louis who we attended the funeral last time? Yes, it's him. I can recognize him. Clark hadn't finished speaking when he heard a low roar. It was a low roar as if phlegm was stuck in the throat, accompanied by a pungent smell of decay. Realizing that it was the zombie just now, the three of them held their breath nervously, not daring to breathe. Click, click, the sound of Louis' footsteps echoed in the ears of several people. Clark was filled with fear at first, but when he saw Lana behind him, he gritted his teeth, picked up the half-brick at hand, and was ready to rush out immediately if there was any problem. He had made up his mind not to surrender. Even if he only had this half-brick, he would protect Lana and Azu. Dang, suddenly. A sharp metallic sound suddenly sounded. Lana was shocked to see a bright color flash in the night. Chapter 18, From Dusk to Dawn. The sound of a sharp blade cutting into flesh and blood rang out. Then came the sound of gurgling. Azu and Clark were shocked to see a human head rolling on the ground. Is that Uncle Louis' head? Clark stared at the incredible scene in front of him with wide eyes. Then he saw the zombie Louis who had chased him before, falling heavily to the ground. Lana, who was hiding in the deepest part, did not see the zombie's head being chopped off. She just felt a familiar sound. Bang! Bang! Footsteps sounded, walking towards Clark and the others. Clark held his breath nervously. We found you, a familiar voice came into the ears of the three. Azu immediately raised his head in surprise, and what he saw was Peter's familiar face. Dad! Azu rushed over excitedly and threw himself into his arms. Clark saw the Godfather coming, and the heart that had been hanging was finally let go. Lana stared blankly at Peter holding the samurai sword. Peter's body was splattered with a lot of blood, exuding a strange smell. Although it was a bit scary, the figure of the other party holding a samurai sword still made her somewhat frightened heart gradually calm down. Peter held the samurai sword that he had taken from Father Norma's house, and he breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that the three little ones were safe. After leaving Father Norma's house, he immediately rushed to the auditorium. Unexpectedly, due to the attack of the zombies, the auditorium had turned into a sea of blood. After asking the anxious Jonathan couple and Neil about the possible location of the three little ones, he chopped them all the way with a knife. Although he didn't know how to use a knife, his body had gradually become superhuman under the influence of the watch. He used the samurai sword to chop the zombies like chopping melons and vegetables. Are you okay? Zu, Clark and Lana, are you bitten? Peter checked Zu to see if he was bitten, and asked Clark and Lana. No. Lana was a little embarrassed when Peter rubbed her face and then checked her body. That's good, let's get out of here. Peter tore his coat into strips and tied Lana and Clark to his back. Zu, you can keep up with me, right? After tying Lana and Clark to his back, he asked Zu. Zu nodded heavily and said in the tone of a little adult, yes, Dad, I will protect you. You protect me? Peter thought to himself that your laser eyes sometimes work and sometimes don't work, and I still need you to protect me? Okay, let's fight together as father and son, like from dusk till dawn? Peter glared at Zu. About you watching horror movies secretly, Zu, you can explain to me after you get out. Zu's little face immediately drooped. Raising the samurai sword, Peter said to Clark and Lana on his back, Clark, Lana, close your eyes, we are about to start. Swish, Peter walked out of the nursery and faced the zombies rushing up, and swung the samurai sword fiercely. The screaming zombie was instantly chopped in half, and sticky black blood spurted out. Facing another zombie rushing up, Peter hit it with his elbow. Boom! With a loud noise like a cannon, the zombie's body hit the ground hard. A large pit was knocked out of the ground, and debris fell like rain. The originally ferocious zombie's body was torn into pieces by the impact. Swoosh! The samurai sword chopped at the third zombie at lightning speed, and the sharp blade directly chopped off the zombie's head. The zombie did not resist at all and was easily solved. Azu next to him was stunned. His father turned out to be so powerful. Clark behind Peter also opened his mouth in astonishment. He thought the Godfather was an ordinary person, but he found that the angry Godfather seemed to be more terrifying than a zombie. Lori Lana, who was tied to Peter's back, kept her eyes closed until blood splashed on her face. My God, that's blood. She almost vomited. Resisting the urge to vomit, she pressed her face tightly against Peter's back. Lana could smell the odor on her body, the stench of blood, and the disgusting, sticky smell of copper rust. Bloody pictures of Peter flashed before her eyes like a kaleidoscope. But for some reason, these extremely bloody pictures did not make her feel afraid of Peter. Instead, they gave her a sense of security that she had never felt before. Crash! Peter kicked the door open, and what greeted him was the zombies rushing over. The samurai sword passed like lightning, and sticky blood immediately splashed out. Azu next to him was splashed with dirty blood again. But this time he did not collapse like last time, but sniffed his nose and felt the stench of blood. Dad, be careful. Behind you, seeing a zombie attacking Peter from behind, Azu immediately shouted at him. At the same time, a laser shot out of his eyes, cutting the attacking zombie in half. Peter turned around and saw a body cut in half by the laser eye. Well done, Zu. Peter praised Zu, who had blood all over his face. Although the boy's appearance reminded him of his famous perverted scenes in his previous life. After being praised by Peter, Zu immediately became motivated. I said, Dad, I will protect you. His laser eyes once again aimed at a zombie that was roaring and rushing towards him. Zizzy, the thermal vision hit the zombie's chest and pierced through it directly. Unexpectedly, after the zombie's chest was penetrated, it did not stop and continued to rush towards Zu. Peter turned the samurai sword and chopped it from top to bottom with one hand. The zombie was instantly split in half from the middle by him. Poor Zu was covered in blood again. Without bothering to comfort Zu, Peter looked at the fire spreading towards this side, kicked open the side door of the corridor of the auditorium, and then rushed into the fire escape. There were several corpses lying on the ground. Peter's footsteps did not stop, and he rushed to the entrance at the fastest speed. The zombies who wanted to come up to stop him were beheaded by him with a knife. The flames made a crackling sound, and the smell of blood and fire filled the whole space. Bang! When he jumped to the entrance, a ball of sparks flashed, followed by a violent explosion. The exploding flames attacked him. Peter immediately put his arms together and pressed them against his face. The flames hit his arms with a boom. Clark and Lana leaned tightly on his back, and Azu was blocked behind him. After the burning and impact of the flames disappeared, the three slowly opened their eyes. Chapter 19. It turns out that the Godfather is Superman. After being hit by the flames, Peter slowly lowered his arm. His arm was not burned as Azu and the other two had imagined, but there was no wound. Dad, Azu looked at Peter in shock. He finally understood why he had laser eyes. It turned out that he inherited his father's superpowers. Azu cast an admiring look at Peter. He wanted to be as handsome as his father in the future. Poor Azu didn't know that his adoption was already a well-known secret among Peter's friends. Clark looked at the Godfather with heavy breathing. It turned out that the Godfather was Superman. Clark, whose vision and hearing abilities suddenly increased recently, found that his defense ability was getting stronger and stronger. Last time he was on the farm, he accidentally put his hand into the rotating harvester, but he was not hurt at all. This made him, who was a little distressed, have different thoughts in his mind in an instant. The Godfather's body was so strong that he could block the explosion. Could it be that he was actually the Godfather's child, and Azu was adopted? Clark, who already understood the meaning of biological and adopted, began to wonder if he and Azu were taken away by mistake in the hospital. Bang! A ball of fire exploded again, and the heat wave of the explosion hit. Peter didn't care about dealing with the scattered zombies. He hugged Zu, put away his samurai sword, and ran out quickly. Oh my God. That's great, you're okay, Lana, seeing Lana walking towards her, Neil, who was blocked outside by the fire and couldn't enter, hugged her and kissed her face excitedly. That's great, Lana, I was scared just now. If I lose you, I really don't know what to do. Looking at her aunt who was about to cry with excitement, Lana comforted her sensibly. I'm fine, and, how did you get out? Lana, Neil asked Lana while checking if she was injured. It's Uncle Patrick. Lana looked up and looked into the distance. The flames were as bright and dazzling as the midday sun, illuminating the entire street. Many cars rushed to the scene, and people were running on the street in various nightgowns and pajamas. She saw someone standing on the steps of the police station, cupping his hands next to his mouth, shouting something. The piercing sirens, fire truck alarms and blazing fires in the town seemed to swallow up all the sounds. Lana's eyes caught Peter's figure in the flames and the crowd, but she didn't find him for a long time. She exhaled, and a girl's melancholy suddenly rose in her heart. In the dark woods, Father Norma stood in front of a blood altar, holding a black magic book in his hand. Damn it! Damn it! The zombies imprisoned in the black magic book lost contact one after another, which made him panic. Fine beads of sweat dripped from his head. According to the records in the black magic book, if he wanted to obtain the magical power to cure lung cancer, he had to sacrifice more living people. This is also the reason why he controlled the zombies and killed them in the auditorium. The more people died, the better the effect of the sacrifice. The early process was smooth, and many people were killed by zombies. Just when he used black magic to control these undead creatures to leave, he didn't expect that they all lost contact. These were all undead creatures he carefully cultivated, and losing them all at once made him feel very painful. More importantly, if these zombies fall into the hands of the government, it will definitely cause big trouble. Shan. Just as he tried to contact the zombies with magic, he suddenly heard a strange sound in the forest. Who? The alert Norma immediately shouted into the forest. It's me, Father Norma, a familiar voice came. Norma raised her head and looked at the entrance of the woods. Under the dim moonlight, the face of the person gradually became clear. Peter. Norma looked at Peter, who suddenly appeared in surprise, as well as Clark and Homelander standing on his left and right. Why are you here? This should be the question I ask you, Father Norma. Peter looked at the bloody altar. Father, as a clergyman, such behavior should be a blasphemy against God. Right, I'm here. Norma pretended to be stupid and said, I'm holding a spiritual purification ceremony, sacrificing with the death of others. Peter took a step forward and reached out to grab the black magic book in his hand. Norma tried to stop him, but was slapped away. Peter opened a page of the black magic book in his hand. Undead creatures? So, Father Norma, you told those who lost their loved ones the news of the resurrection of the corpse, and bewitched them to bury the corpse in that swamp, right? Norma, whose teeth were loosened by the slap, looked at Peter in shock. Who are you? He never thought that a seemingly ordinary farmer would have such incredible power. Peter did not answer, and continued, my cousin Louis lost little Terry, and his wife was heartbroken, so she was bewitched by you and buried little Terry's body in that swamp. One night, little Terry came back to life, but what she didn't know was that any reversal of fate has a price. She wanted to fight death, but the result was like putting a coin on the railroad track and trying to stop a high-speed train. Looking at the other person, Peter narrowed his eyes. Little Terry, who is under your control, killed Louis and his wife, and then turned into zombies. These zombies you controlled launched a massacre tonight, right? Norma stood up and said angrily, yes, I controlled these undead creatures to attack people because I wanted to change my fate. I have lung cancer. For my disease, I need to sacrifice them. Clark, who was next to him, was stunned when he heard the Godfather's words. He thought that the characters in the Monkey's Paw only existed in the story. How could someone really hurt others for their own greed? Clark clenched his fists. Azu listened to the conversation between his father and Norma, but he didn't look angry. Anyway, this guy was going to be killed by his father, no matter what he had done, it didn't matter. Azu had guessed that his father came here to kill him. I have been a devout believer in God for half my life, and this is how he treats his believers, Norma said angrily. I have seen all kinds of misfortunes in people, and I have also seen with my own eyes how fate controls their lives. Since everyone's life is a donkey cart rushing towards a cliff, let's fall into the abyss of darkness together. As he said this, he was about to release a spell to kill Peter and his group. The next second, Peter rushed to his side. Crack! Norma's neck made a crisp sound and was instantly broken. Chapter 20 Lex Luthor. Plop, Father Norma's body fell heavily to the ground. A lot of dust was splashed on the ground. The priest, with his eyes open, stared at the fallen leaves above his head, and the light in his eyes gradually faded. After twisting the other's neck, Peter turned around. Clark looked at the body lying on the ground in shock. He didn't expect that the Godfather would kill Father Norma directly. Let's go. Peter held Clark and Azu's hands and prepared to leave the forest. Clark let Peter hold his hand in a daze, and only recovered from his dazed state when he left the forest and got in the car. Godfather? Why, kill Father Norma? Clark, who was sitting in the back seat, hesitated and finally asked the question that he cared about very much. Because Father Norma once said so, Peter said to Clark while driving the car, "You must not be merciful, you must give life for life, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a hand for a hand, a foot for a foot." The priest believes that when dealing with bad people, you should fight back with the same means as the other party used to attack you. He killed others, so he will be treated the same way by others. This is the fairest thing in the world. I think Father Norma will agree with this. Clark nodded as if he understood. Although it makes sense, why does it feel weird? But he still asked with some entanglement, but didn't the Godfather say that life is the most precious? Without waiting for Peter to answer, Azu next to him replied, "The life of a bad person is not precious. Father Norma is a bad guy. Think about it, Clark, he almost killed your parents." Azu thought Clark was just a fool. "If you let him go, maybe he will kill your parents next time." Peter, who was driving, heard Azu's words and looked at him with some respect. This kid understands such a truth at such a young age? The reason he brought the two to the scene was that he hoped Clark and Azu could realize the truth of eradicating all evil. He didn't expect Azu to realize his good intention so quickly. Clark thought about it and felt that this was the truth. His little head couldn't think of a better way to deal with it. Seeing that Clark was convinced by him, Azu proudly said to Peter, "Dad, if I were you, I would do the same." "Yeah," Peter nodded. "I don't doubt that you would do this. After all, you are increasingly showing the perversion of your previous life." Clark, with mixed feelings, exhaled and cast his eyes on the scenery flashing outside. Azu next to him exuded a faint smell of blood. He suddenly realized that his future life might change a little. Although he didn't know how to change, it must be related to the Godfather. The car drove through the remote road outside the town and rushed to Patrick's farm. The next day, early in the morning, news about the terrorist attack in Smallville came from the radio. There was an explosion and terrorist attack at the Smallville auditorium. When the terrorists attacked the people, a fire broke out in the auditorium. The fire has been put out. Many bodies were found at the scene. The confirmed bodies include William Thomas, a firefighter from Smallville town, and 3 dancers at the ball. Peter listened to the radio, turned around, and casually put the black magic book in his hand on the table. He studied the magic book last night and found that it was full of forbidden spells and sacrificial magic. He has never been very interested in cursed debtors such as magicians, so he plans to put the magic book away and put it aside. Maybe he will pick up a baby who knows magic in the future, and he can use it as an enlightenment teaching material for the other party. The broadcast on the radio continued. More than 10 other people were sent to the hospital due to smoke inhalation and minor burns. It is reported that the organization of this terrorist attack involved the use of biological weapons. "Dad," Azu came down from upstairs, rubbed his eyes, and asked him, "Where is Clark?" Clark was picked up by his parents. Hearing that Clark had left, Azu was a little depressed. "I still want to fly a kite with Clark." The heartless Zu had completely gotten over what happened last night. He wanted to take Clark to fly a kite. "Zu, come here," Peter waved at him. Zu sat down obediently and looked at him eagerly. "Dad, do you want to fly a kite with me? Let's talk about flying a kite later. Let's talk about your sneaking into horror movies." Peter looked at Zu's butt with a serious look. He felt it necessary to fulfill his fatherly duties and deal with this kid. Mr. Luthor, at the Metropolitan Central Hospital, the doctor said to Leno Luthor, who was lying on the bed, "Your injuries are not serious, just some minor burns. I believe you will recover soon and be discharged from the hospital." "Thank you, Dr. Ryan." Leno Luthor smiled and thanked the doctor. After the doctor left, the smile on his face quickly disappeared. As the helmsman of the Luthor Group, he had never experienced such a dangerous scene as last night. The Luthor Group is acquiring land in Smallville town to create a chemical group. He happened to be in the town last night, and took his men to participate in the harvest festival. Unexpectedly, a group of monsters that would bite anyone they saw suddenly appeared in the auditorium. Under the cover of the bodyguards, he escaped from the auditorium and finally did not lose his life there. Touching his aching forehead, he remembered the horror scene he saw last night. The ferocious and bloodthirsty monster directly tore the throat of the escaped person, and blood spurted out. Then came the human holding a samurai sword, carrying 2 young children on his back, and easily cut off the monster's head. He has always believed in rationalism, and now he has to wonder if he had hallucinations because of fear at that time. No. It must not be an illusion. He swore that he saw it very clearly. The image of the killer-like guy has been deeply imprinted in his mind. He rang the call bell and called his men outside the door in. Any news about a mysterious man? Leno Luthor asked his men. He had previously drawn the image of Peter and asked his men to send people to look for him. Sorry, sir, we haven't found him yet. Then send more people. I need to know who that person is as soon as possible, Leno Luthor said calmly. You can go out now. I hope I can get good news next time we meet. After his men left, the door of the ward was pushed open with a creak. A bald little boy of about 6 or 7 years old entered the ward. Dad, the little bald boy greeted Leno. I'm here to see you, Lex. Seeing his son appear, Leno's mood immediately improved a lot. He stretched out his arms and hugged the little bald boy who climbed onto the bed. Chapter 21 Persuading Clark to Change Career. Peter didn't know that Leno Luthor was investigating him. Now he was busy scolding Azu. Clark next to him was also being scolded. Why are you quarreling? Peter asked Clark first. Clark said aggrievedly. Azu said that the leaves I drew looked like a dog's butt. Really? Peter looked at Azu who was feeling guilty. Yes, Dad, Azu said with a bitter face, touching his butt that was still a little painful from being beaten. He was thick-skinned and others couldn't hurt him, but Peter could let him experience what pain felt like. Peter took the plant leaves that Clark drew with crayons. You shouldn't say that, Azu, Peter taught Azu. But, Clark's drawing really looks like a dog's butt. There are many things in the world that look like a dog's butt, but that doesn't mean you should go around spreading it. Peter closed the album and said to Azu, sometimes you have to hide your thoughts because you will hurt people. Clark listened to his godfather's words and suddenly felt a little depressed. Although he didn't quite understand, it seemed that the godfather also thought that the leaves he drew looked like dog butts. Peter sat on the sofa and asked the two, do you know why I don't agree with you going to school? Generally speaking, American children usually start school at the age of 5 or 6. Of course, the specific regulations vary from state to state and school district, depending on local education policies, resource allocation, and family choices. But in Smallville, most children aged 5 to 6 have already enrolled. For example, Lana started school-age education when she was 5 years old. Now she's a first-grade student and will soon become a second-grade senior. I don't know, Azu shook his head blankly. Because you and Clark are not ready yet, ready not to hurt others and be hurt by others. Jonathan and Martha had talked to him about the issue of the two going to school. But he refused because the two children were not ready yet. He had already imagined the scene of the two being laughed at as freaks after they entered school. Clark spent his previous life in this environment. Because of their physical problems, the two had never been injured, and at the same time they had no control over the size of their strength, so they had no concept of physical injury. In addition to his immature personality, if he is discriminated against by his classmates, he is really afraid that Azu will get angry and kill his classmates. Dad, are we human? Azu thought of the scene of his father killing zombies, and he asked confusedly. Of course, we are all human, you and me, and Clark, we are all human. Azu continued to ask, since we are human, why are we different from others? This is our talent. Did Dad tell you? This is also a responsibility, the responsibility to protect the family. Clark, who was next to him, heard Peter say the responsibility to protect the family, and his eyes immediately lit up. Azu nodded, still a little puzzled, and asked, then why do we have to control ourselves? Peter was silent for a moment, thinking of Jonathan's education of Clark. Superman is not an ordinary child. He has no idea of his own destructiveness. If ordinary parents educate him, it would probably be like a chicken teaching an eagle cub how to live as a chicken. Once he finds out that he is not a chicken, the repressed instincts will be completely out of control. Jonathan and Martha educated Superman by limiting his ability. They didn't want him to be a chicken, but told him that he didn't know how to be an eagle yet. His mind couldn't bear the consequences of this power, So he had to live like an ordinary person and carefully control his ability until the day when he could control the power, and then take the responsibility of this power. Although Peter didn't educate Sue and Clark like Jonathan and his wife, he could learn from them. He stroked their hair and said, "Because you can't bear the consequences of this power getting out of control, so before you enter school, I have to teach you how to control yourself." That is to say, Clark looked up and said expectantly, "Godfather, will you be Sue and I's teacher?" "Yeah, I'm your first teacher." "Then can Dad teach me to draw?" Clark didn't even call him Godfather, but directly called Dad and asked Peter to teach him to draw. Peter looked down at the bud drawn by Clark and felt a little tired. "I think the career that suits you may be a reporter, Clark." Peter solemnly persuaded Clark to change his career. The next day, almost everyone in the town came to the Central Church of Smallville to attend the funeral. The fire and terrorist attack in the auditorium killed more than a dozen people and injured more than 20 people. This was the largest casualty incident in the town since the tornado in 1950. Peter, wearing a black suit, took Clark and Azu to attend the funeral for the second time. Compared with the last time, the two little boys have obviously adapted to the atmosphere of the funeral and kept a solemn expression like adults. "Thank you, Peter. If it weren't for you, Clark might have." Martha and Jonathan thanked Peter. "I am Clark's godfather, this is what I should do." Peter exchanged a few pleasantries with the couple and asked, "What does the government think of this attack? I heard that the governor has commissioned a special committee to investigate." The media's temporary conclusion is a biological attack. The poisoned people lost their minds and attacked people randomly, but we all know that they are terrible zombies. At this time, Jonathan had completely believed Peter's zombie theory. "I never thought that there would be zombies in our town, Jonathan." Seeing someone coming, Martha immediately pulled her husband's sleeve and signaled him to be careful. "I hope I didn't disturb you." Leno Luthor, who had long hair and a unique temperament, came up to greet everyone. Mr. Patrick, and Mr. Kent, right? He called out their names and said to Peter, "My company has dealt with Mr. Patrick before because of business issues." "Who are you?" Peter looked at this familiar guy. "I'm Leno Luthor." Hearing that it was this entrepreneur who was not very famous in the town, Jonathan didn't want to get involved with him, so he just said excuse me and left. Leno Luthor didn't care. Anyway, his target was not the other party. Mr. Luthor still intends to buy my farm. Peter looked at the father of the future Superman's mortal enemy, Lex Luthor, and asked with a frown. "This guy can't be a good person, otherwise how can he cultivate a hero like Lex?" "No, actually, we have given up on building the chemical plant. We are planning an agricultural subsidy program to help farmers in the town." Peter looked at him in surprise. Could this guy suddenly change his personality? If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 22: The Idea of Robbing Thieves. That's surprising, Mr. Luthor. Although your reputation is not very good, you have changed my impression of you today. Peter looked at this entrepreneur with a bad reputation again. Of course, he would not believe that this guy would be a good person who is keen on charity. "The people in Smallville may have some misunderstandings about me." Leno Luthor smiled and shrugged his shoulders. After Peter talked to him for a few words, he saw Clark and Azu waving at him and said to Leno, "Sorry, I have to leave for a while." Leno smiled and made way, watching Peter's figure walk to the two children. "Sir," his men came over and asked him, "do we have to temporarily stop our chemical plant plan?" "This is a big loss for us." "Yes, temporarily stop." His eyes were a little more solemn, "because I found something more valuable." He had already found out that the one who slashed the zombies with a samurai sword that night was Peter Patrick. Destroy the video footage of the scene, and then have the public relations department take action and unify the caliber. The attackers at the scene are just terrorists who have lost their minds. I don't want to see any talk about zombies. He gave orders to his men. On the other side, Peter walked to Clark and Azu and asked them, "What's wrong?" "Clark wants to go to the bathroom." "Are you nervous?" Peter asked Clark on the way to the bathroom, holding his hand. Clark exhaled and said absent-mindedly, "I don't know. I just saw my mother shaking hands and hugging those strangers. The tears of those people wet her collar and sleeves. There was also the fragrance of flowers all over the room. I had a little difficulty breathing." "Godfather," I counted in my mind. They said about 32 times he was not hurt and died quickly, and 25 times God works in his own mysterious way. Godfather, Clark looked up and asked Peter, why do people always repeat the same words? Peter looked at Clark in surprise. He didn't expect this kid to be so sensitive. Sure enough, he has the potential to become a saint. After thinking for a while, he said to Clark, because every similar sentence will make the person who lost their loved one stronger. Oh, Clark nodded. After the funeral, Peter drove Clark and Zoo home. Clark was a little depressed, probably because of the atmosphere of the funeral. Zoo was not surrounded by the shadow of death at the funeral. He asked Peter, Dad, why did Uncle Louis become a zombie? He was obviously more interested in zombies. Because Louis and Vanessa did something wrong, they wanted to revive their son in excessive grief, so they made a wish to the devil and were punished. Peter tried to explain in a way that the two could understand. I know, Clark, who was sitting in the back seat, suddenly said, just like old White in the Monkey's Paw, they made mistakes because of grief. Grief is not a stupid excuse, Clark, although there is a difference between the two, but it is a matter of life and death. As Peter spoke, he thought of the dry swamp. The land contaminated by kryptonite still has magic. How to deal with this land? Maybe he can find the mayor, buy the ownership of the land, and prohibit anyone from entering. The swampland might be useful to him in the future. Thinking of this, he made a decision to buy the land. After driving back home, Peter checked his savings. The average price of land in the United States is $4,100 per acre. Which means that if you want to own 1,000 acres of land, you will need to pay about $4.7 million. Land in Kansas is relatively cheap, and you only need to pay about $3,500 per acre. The swampland covers about 100 acres. If you want to buy it, you have to prepare $350,000. He looked at the bank card in his hand and frowned. Although he went to Metropolis to rob a lot of gangs, he also spent a lot of money because of his two naughty children. Now the balance in the bank card is no more than $200,000. It seems that I have to go to Metropolis to purchase goods. Taking a deep breath, Peter put away the bank card. Clark and Azu can be temporarily taken care of by Neil. If everything goes well, he can solve it in one night. But before that, he needs to make some preparations. Dad, he was planning to go to Metropolis to rob gangs, and Azu came up. What's wrong? I want to hear a story. Zeus said he also wanted to hear a bedtime story. Okay, what story do you want to hear? The Seven Dwarfs, or the Little Mermaid Princess? Dad, Zeus pouted, I'm not Clark. I'm not interested in such childish stories. Oh, Peter looked at him in surprise. Then what do you want to hear about? About zombies? You're still a child? You're not suitable for these. Peter immediately rejected the other party's request. This kid's taste is heavier than his. Zeus became a little depressed after being rejected. Your birthday is in a few days, Zeus. Maybe you can look forward to this. Seeing that the other party was a little depressed, Peter changed the subject and mentioned Zeus' upcoming birthday. When he heard about the birthday, Zeus immediately became excited. Can I make a request, Dad, about my birthday present? It's better not to. Birthdays are full of surprises, Peter said to him. Birthdays almost mean infinite possibilities. A colored jar full of candies, a toy box upside down on the floor. These may all be surprises. Azu's eyes lit up immediately, but soon he remembered something and asked Peter, Dad, when is your birthday? My birthday? Peter was stunned when Azu asked about his birthday. When is his birthday? He can't remember it anymore. After crossing into this world, is his birthday the birthday of his previous life, the birthday of his original body, or the day he crossed into this world? Dad has already passed the stage of celebrating birthdays. Why? Azu asked curiously. Patting Azu's head, he slowly said, because only when you grow up, you will find that every birthday is like a turnstile. It takes you further and further, deeper and deeper. Suddenly one day, birthdays become irrelevant and completely inevitable. Peter coughed and felt that he had said too much. He patted Azu's head and said, it's too late. You should go upstairs and go to bed. Chapter 23. Is this guy a devil? Metropolis. A black Oldsmobile Sierra limousine glided gently through a street. The roads in the street were crisscrossed like a web woven by a drunk spider. After driving past one house after another, the car finally stopped on a gravel private driveway. Bang! The car door opened, and several men in black suits picked up several women who were in a coma in the back seat and walked into the room. In the wide hall, Frank Gallo, who had been waiting for a long time, saw his men bringing people in and picked up the cigar at hand. He was a big guy with a doppelganger face and a curved hooked nose. Because he was a Sicilian, his oily skin often had the color of solidified cinnamon. "Boss, the quality of these women is good." After the men threw the 3 women to the ground, they said to him, "The rich people must be very satisfied." Frank stood up, looked at the women on the ground, and took a puff of cigar with satisfaction. "Not bad, especially this one." He reached out and touched the face of one of the blonde girls. The girl's figure and face were both top-notch. Frank was the boss of this gang. The business he was engaged in was not like other gangs, such as drug trafficking or arms smuggling. It was the more risky but more profitable business of trafficking women and children. He had always been sending young and beautiful women to the beds of those big men in exchange for their political protection and money. "Send her to my room." Frank looked at the exposed skin of the blonde girl and suddenly became interested. He asked his men to send the girl to his room. In the room, under the dim light, Frank touched the girl's face with his fingers and nodded frequently as if he was appreciating a work of art. His fingers climbed up the girl's chin like spider legs, past the dried blood, and came to her forehead. Martha MacDonald woke up slowly. Her head was tingling and her whole body felt extremely tired. Rubbing her hazy eyes, she was a little confused as to why she seemed to be lying on the bed. Wasn't she drinking with her girlfriends in the bar? A handsome young man came over to toast her, but she and her girlfriends didn't take it seriously and drank a glass of wine. Her memory after that was blurred and she couldn't remember anything. She tried to open her eyes, and suddenly felt something crawling on her forehead. Looking at the unknown object, she found that it was a few fingers. The owner of the fingers, a fat guy, was smiling at her like a devil. "Ah!" the frightened Martha MacDonald screamed in fear. She tried to curl up backwards, but Frank grabbed her arm and dragged her to the end of the bed. Bang! He punched Martha in the face without any mercy. Martha immediately felt a sharp pain. She was dizzy and lost her resistance. Just as Frank was about to do whatever he wanted, he suddenly heard a voice from behind. "Hey, Frank, fuck. I said no one is allowed to come in." Frank, whose interest was disturbed, turned around angrily. As a result, he was grabbed by the head and slammed against the wall. Frank, who was dizzy and dazed, subconsciously wanted to fight back, but was hit in the lower abdomen. He was struck by lightning, holding his stomach and slowly fell to the floor. In the severe pain, he raised his head with difficulty, and saw a face wearing black framed glasses. Peter looked down at Frank who was groaning with his hands on his stomach, and then looked at the girl who was huddled on the bed. Shaking his head, he dragged Frank and dragged him outside. Peter originally planned to just rob the nest of the gang headquarters and kill all the scum who trafficked children and women, but he didn't expect to encounter such a thing. Bang! Frank was dragged to the living room and kicked hard. He groaned in pain and looked around. As a result, he saw his brothers lying on the ground groaning, and his heart was immediately chilled. "Sir, there's money here. If you want, you can take it all." Realizing that Peter in front of him was not a good person, Frank immediately gave in. "You are wrong. The money here belongs to me the moment I step in, so you don't need to remind me that all this money belongs to me." Peter said that he came here just to make money. He pulled a chair over and sat down, then picked up a pistol from the ground. "But I can let you go." Peter pointed the pistol at the other party. "Since you like to show off your masculinity so much, now do it. Come on, show your men to them." "What?" Frank thought he heard it wrong and looked at him in shock. "Come on." Peter asked all the brothers lying on the ground to stand up. "Stand in front of your boss and watch him show you." Frank swallowed his saliva and begged Peter for mercy and fear. "Sir, I was wrong. Please let me go. I will give you all my money, and you can have whatever you want." Seeing this guy's embarrassed and terrified appearance, Peter's desire to play faded, and he directly shot the guy in the lower part of his body. With a bang, Frank, holding his body, fell to the ground, groaning in pain. The other gangsters saw Peter firing and wanted to fight back, but they were shot one after another and fell to the ground and died instantly. Martha MacDonald was in the bedroom, leaning against the door with her back. Although she couldn't see the situation outside, Peter's words made her heart beat non-stop. Is this guy a devil? Although she was full of gratitude to Peter for saving her, she felt that he was very bad. However, she clenched her fists and felt unexpectedly relieved. To deal with such a villain, you have to use such means. Just as she was thinking wildly, with a bang, the sound of gunfire outside suddenly scared her. Bang! 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 The dull sound of gunfire rang out outside. followed by the sound of thumps falling to the ground one after another. The surroundings fell into dead silence, and Martha MacDonald held her breath nervously. Chapter 24 Magical Glasses, Stubborn Jonathan. After waiting for an unknown amount of time, Martha MacDonald finally suppressed her fear and secretly opened a crack in the door to look outside. With the thin moonlight, she saw several bodies lying on the ground. The guy who had tried to violate her before was lying on the ground with blood gushing out. The pungent smell of blood entered her nose, making her want to vomit. She looked at the two unconscious girlfriends lying on the sofa, and after confirming that they were fine, she breathed a sigh of relief. With trembling hands, she fumbled in her girlfriend's pocket, took out a mobile phone, and called the police. 10 minutes later, the police from the Metropolitan Police Department finally arrived. Name: I'm Martha MacDonald, 22 years old, a teacher. Martha crossed her arms and trembled as she replied to a female police officer, "My friends and I were drinking in a bar. I don't know why I woke up and came here." The female police officer nodded and continued to take notes. "Did you see the suspect's appearance? Each bullet accurately hit the key parts of these gangsters." In the eyes of the female police officer, the murderer who killed these people must not be a simple person. No, Martha MacDonald swallowed her saliva. He was wearing a pair of black framed glasses. "Because it was too dark at night, I couldn't see clearly." "Are you sure?" The female police officer looked at her suspiciously. "Just because he was wearing a pair of glasses, you couldn't see his appearance clearly?" Yes, Martha MacDonald nodded guiltily. "Really?" "Godfather, at Patrick's farm?" Clark asked uncertainly, wearing the black framed glasses given to him by Peter. "Will others not recognize me if I wear these glasses?" "Of course." Peter helped him adjust the position of the glasses frame and said, "Glasses can help you hide your identity. There's an unsolved mystery about Superman Clark. Once Superman wears glasses, no one will recognize him. So some people think that Superman's greatest superpower is his glasses." Peter naturally does not believe the argument that his greatest superpower is glasses. He believes that most people are patients with face blindness caused by glasses. "Godfather, why can glasses hide one's identity?" Clark asked Peter, wearing black framed glasses. "Because glasses reduce people's ability to recognize strangers." Peter was determined to teach him so that he could adapt to the future life of a superhero in advance. "You and Azu can use this prop, coupled with small movements, to convey different messages, just like this." Peter put on black framed glasses and made a slightly hunched forward posture. After demonstrating the posture of wearing glasses, he took off his glasses, straightened his back, relaxed his shoulders, and made a steady posture. Body language can also convey different messages. It's better with glasses. Have you learned it? Clark's eyes widened as he watched Peter skillfully switch between two different temperaments. He felt that the Godfather was just like a magician, full of strange and incredible abilities. He took the black-framed glasses from Peter and decided to learn the Godfather's magical ability. At least he could use this to escape if he made a mistake outside in the future. Seeing Clark excitedly leaving the room with the black-framed glasses, Peter turned around, took out the purse under the bed, and put it on the table with a bang. The black money he robbed from Frank's gang was about $1 million, enough for him to support for a while. After shooting and killing Frank and his gang members, he robbed the other party's safe. In addition to cash, there was also a record of transactions between Frank's gang and many political bigwigs in the safe. Peter casually flipped open the account book, and a series of dirty transactions appeared in front of him. Lolita, congressman, mayor, and church. Shaking his head, he threw the account book on the table. "I didn't expect these guys to play so much. If all these politicians and dignitaries were taken out and shot, I guess none of them would be innocent. But this thing has no value to him for the time being. Unless he wants to run for governor tomorrow, he can use this as a threat." After locking the cash and account books in the drawer, he looked towards the swamp in the dark night. He should be able to obtain the ownership of the swamp tomorrow. The next day, early in the morning, Jonathan went to the town government office with Peter. "Honestly, I don't understand why you bought a dried-up swamp," Jonathan said to him puzzledly. "What crops do you want to grow?" "If you have such a plan, Peter, it's not a good idea," he sighed. "The price of farm products has dropped, and now our income is getting less and less. Martha and I are thinking of going to the bank to borrow some money. The guys in the bank are a group of sharks." Peter, who was driving, frowned slightly. "Jonathan, I still have some money here. You can use it to make ends meet." "No, your farm is not doing well now. I can't trouble you anymore. Jonathan didn't know that Peter often went to the metropolis to rob the thieves, and thought that he was like himself, and all his income depended on the farm. I used to do other businesses, so I still have some savings. Jonathan: no, Peter, I know you want to help me, but I can't take your money, you still have to spend money to buy the swamp. Although Jonathan was grateful that Peter was willing to lend a hand, he still refused. I can't take your money, you're always so stubborn, Jonathan. Peter knew the other person's temper, so he was not surprised at all that he was rejected. Jonathan's father-in-law was also a small asset. As long as he asked his father-in-law, he could give Clark a higher quality of life. It would not be a big problem if the father-in-law helped to ease the farm's financial problems. But the stubborn Jonathan never contacted his father-in-law. Do you know why Clark likes to run to me? Because you set a standard for Clark, and this standard never changes, such as not allowing him to watch TV for more than 2 hours, and not being picky about food. Jonathan, sometimes being stubborn and unchanging is not a good thing, Peter said while driving. People should learn from fountains, not drainage ditches. They should learn from fallen leaves and streams that drift with the current, not dams that restrict their freedom. Am I right? Jonathan nodded thoughtfully. Sometimes I do ignore Clark's thoughts, but, Peter, I still can't take your money, Peter, so I said it in vain? Just when he was having a headache because of Jonathan's stubbornness, he suddenly noticed that there were many people gathered on the street ahead, and there were also several police cars with flashing red lights parked on the side of the road. He stepped on the brakes and frowned to look forward. What happened? Thank you inexplicably Dandelion for the reward, thank you all for voting, bow. Chapter 25. Cruel things are rewarded. Officer Ryan, what happened? Peter looked out the car window and asked Officer Ryan, who was maintaining order at the scene. A guy robbed the bank alone and injured the security guard. Ryan put away the walkie-talkie. This is the first time someone dares to rob the Luther family's bank. Luther family. Peter cast his eyes on the bank not far away. The words Luther Family Investment Bank came into his eyes. Jonathan, who was sitting in the co-pilot's seat, complained. Leno Luther robbed ordinary people's money, and the robbers robbed Leno Luther's money. The difference is that the former is legal and the latter is illegal. Ahem. Ryan coughed and pretended not to hear. That robber is not simple. The security guard said he was like a monster. In troubled times, we should all keep a low profile, don't you think? Peter, seeing Ryan turn the topic to himself, Peter shook his head. I have always been a low-key person, Officer Ryan. Well, maybe. I wish you a pleasant afternoon. He greeted Peter and the others and turned to leave. After Ryan left, Peter did not start the car, but looked at the bank with broken glass doors. Which bastard did this? The Luther family's bank was his private land. He had originally planned to rob the gangs in Metropolis after he had fleeced all the money, and then he would come to the Luther family's bank to rob it, but he didn't expect that someone had gotten there first. Peter, are you okay? Seeing that Peter did not drive and kept staring at the bank, Jonathan thought something was wrong with him. I'm fine, I'm just wondering who did it. Peter started the car and rushed to the mayor's office. Metropolis, Leno Luther's office. Sitting in the manager's chair, Leno was watching the surveillance video of the Luther Family Investment Bank. In the video, the guy wearing a demon mask grabbed the security guard's neck and threw him forward. Crash! The security guard's body broke the glass and fell heavily on the road. Bang! The security guard hiding in the corner of the counter fired a shot at the robber. Unexpectedly, after being hit in the body, the robber just took a step back, and then, in the shocked eyes of the armed security guard, he grabbed him and smashed him against the wall with a bang. The security guard, who was hit on the back, spit out blood and slid down the wall. Seeing this, Leno Luther frowned. Squeak! Just as he was watching the surveillance video, the door was suddenly pushed open. Little bald Lex Luther walked in. Dad, seeing his son coming in, Leno Luther immediately pressed the remote control to turn off the surveillance video. Lex, you should have knocked on the door. Leno Luther turned around and faced Lex. Leno always felt that he owed his son. 6 years ago, he drove 2-year-old Lex to Smallville. As a result, Lex wanted to urinate on the way. At that time, he was answering a phone call, so he did not accompany Lex into the cornfield. As a result, a meteorite fell from the sky and hit the cornfield. When he rushed into the cornfield, he found his son who had fainted. Afterwards, although Lex was fine, it was probably because of the radiation that his hair could no longer grow. Lex didn't know that his father thought of the meteor shower that caused him to stop growing hair. He closed the door gently and said, Sorry, Dad, I will pay attention next time. I want to talk to you about Valina. Lex's face was stern. Dad, Valina is a very competent nanny. I don't understand why you want to fire her. Did you come in to talk to me about this? Yes, I hope you can reconsider it. Dad, you are still young, and you don't understand many things. Lex argued. I don't know nothing, Dad. Valina is a dedicated employee, so she should be rewarded, not punished. This is the normal law of nature. Isn't this what you taught me? Do you think I'm wrong? No, Dad, Lex looked at his father's intimidating momentum and his voice weakened a little. Leno stood up and stared at him with a compelling gaze. Let me tell you, Lex, people understand nature in a certain way, thinking that it is harmonious and fair, but in fact it is not so. It is more inclined to the evil side, and cruel things are rewarded. Do you understand? Lex looked at Leno Luthor in astonishment. He seemed to be meeting his father for the first time. He opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but finally walked out of the office in silence. Looking at his son's somewhat lonely back, Leno suddenly felt a little regretful. He shouldn't have said this to him. He was about to apologize to Lex, but the phone suddenly rang. Frowning, he answered the phone. Sir, that swamp has been bought by someone. Hearing that the swamp he was about to take was taken by someone first, Leno Luthor felt even worse. I don't care what method you use, get the ownership of that land for me. Leno, who already knew that the swamp was unusual, naturally didn't want to be taken away by others. Sir, we have found out that it is Peter Patrick. He signed a contract with the mayor before us. Hearing Peter's name, Leno was stunned. After a while, he said to the other end of the phone, don't touch him yet, Peter Patrick. After repeating Peter's name, his expression became complicated. Peter was on his way back to the farm at this time, and he didn't know that someone was thinking about him. Buzz, the sound of the lawnmower sounded, and Azu was muttering that his father had not come back yet. He pushed the lawnmower forward to cut the weeds on the lawn. Because the grassland had not been cleaned recently, the grass grew more and more vigorously. Based on the obligation to help the family with farm work, Azu took the initiative to pick up the lawnmower and carry out the weeding task. Click, maybe something got stuck in the lawnmower, causing the machine to stop. Confused, Azu bent down and wanted to check what was wrong with the machine. He put his fingers into the rotating wheel of the hinge gear, trying to pull out a steel bar stuck in it. Bang! He pulled out the steel bar with a little force. The high-speed rotating reamer also started to rotate, and instantly rolled up his finger. Startled, Azu suddenly pulled out his finger and leaned forward. As a result, in his excitement, he threw the lawnmower into the sky. Azu watched in amazement as he threw the lawnmower into the sky like a baseball, and then fell vertically. Clark, who was helping to move things at the side of the barn, heard a strange sound coming from the sky. Huh? He looked up in confusion, and what he saw was the lawnmower that was magnified in his eyes. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.